local media that is present. If you wish a copy of this broadcast, please reach out to the member of the committee or the administration. Good evening, guys. First on the agenda is the approval of minutes. I assume everyone had the chance to review the minutes. I get a motion to accept the minutes. Motion by Chris.
Sorry, one comment. I think on page 3 or 8, there was a reference to the people that participated with Mr. Kern and Joe. I believe it was Miss Fitzgerald that was with them. There was an X left in there. It was Miss Fitzgerald.
Okay.
Was the
Okay,
party.
right.
But otherwise, they look good.
Thank you, Megan.
Yep.
All right, let's finish that. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Motion by Chris, seconded by Laura. All in favor? Next on the agenda, announcements, correspondence, and distributions. Anybody got anything? Megan?
I would. Go ahead, Chris.
No, go ahead.
Just maybe mention to, I know this is kind of the time of choral and band and orchestra concerts, and so had an opportunity to attend the 6th and 7th grade band and orchestra concert last night at Stacy on Tuesday, which was phenomenal. Great performance. And Kevin, I just wanted to share each of the directors that got up, and there were 3 that kind of led their various parts, went out of their way to thank the administration for the support of the music program in the schools, and just in return would like to commend them because it is a phenomenal program, and I think it's due to the instruction, so we're lucky to have them.
I agree 100%. We have an amazing music program from pre-K all the way through the high school. It's awesome.
And on those lines, the high school group was actually at Memorial today, kind of walking the halls performing, and I was with 2 kindergarten classes who were dancing in the hallways, like loving it. So it was great to see that interaction. Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you.
Yep.
Chris?
Actually, I'm going to point to you, Kevin. There was a girl that was announced today from the unified basketball team.
Yes.
That is going to an NBA
Correct.
All-Star. Can you
Correct.
speak to? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Personally, I just saw the social media post and thought it was really.
Yeah, Kathy, do you have the name of the
Exciting
girl? Ashley Aldridge, good. I know I was going to mess it up. So this is awesome, actually. This was an international competition. And basically, the NBA is having a unified basketball game during All-Star Weekend. And one of our Milford former students is part of it. And so they're going to go out to the NBA All-Star game in Charlotte in February. And they're going to play, she's going to play in a game with like Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and the whole crew, and they're going to participate in the whole weekend's activities. So it's going to be like a once-in-a-lifetime wild experience. And they had 5 students. That's a great point that you brought that up. 5 students from the United States and 7 students from the rest of the world.
Wow.
So they're kind of doing like a world. So I guess the All-Stars who are from the U.S. are going to play with our All-Stars, and the World All-Stars are going to play with the Unified World All-Stars. So it's going to be kind of an awesome event. What a great experience.
Exactly, yeah.
And something that you'll just remember for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank
I tried to
you.
get Jen Walsh. She's going to be making a travel request because Jen Walsh is going to chaperone probably at our January meeting, and she was not interested in taking me along.
I wonder why.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you. Chris? Kevin, you got anything? Anybody else?
Nope, I'm good.
All right, next on the agenda is invitation to speak. That would be you.
How are we?
Hello, good evening.
Good. Good evening, yes. So
Before you start, Mr. Legore was part of that band today, and he was
Absolutely.
performing.
Yes,
he did an
I was
outstanding
gonna-
job.
I
along
was
with the rest of the-
I was going to mention that, yes.
All right, good. Any other thunder I can steal from you?
I don't think so.
All right, good. Go ahead.
So, I'm Josh Legore, obviously. I'm sitting here. I am, the class vice president for the class of 2019. Sitting here to give you the update on the high school. Long story short, we're going in a break. There's not much. I guess I'll start with, I'll tail off of the music department. Like you guys were saying, the high school actually just had their winter concert last night. And that was a great concert put together. That was every single person in the music department from freshman to senior, a bunch of various different ensembles. It went really well. It was very successful. It's always a good fundraising thing for the department. As you guys know, we're going to Disney in March, so all that money helps. So that's all good stuff. And it was a great concert. It was almost packed. It was almost every seat was taken in the house. It was a really good night. And then on top of what Mrs. Hornberger was saying, and what you were saying, we did go Christmas caroling today around the district, which is I've never done that before. It was my first time ever doing it. I had a lot of fun doing it. I wish I did it 3 other years, but just never clicked on me because I wasn't cool enough, I guess. But we started here went to Brookside, came back, went to Shining Star, went around here a little bit, then went to Stacy, and then went to Memorial. So it was really cool to see all the kids adapt to the music in their own way. I mean, all the little kids, like Ms. Holmberg was saying, loved it. They were bopping around, dancing. All the middle schoolers are like, I really just don't care. And the high schoolers, the high schoolers were more kind of like,
It's your job to pull them in.
almost. I tried to find Jake.
Right. Oh, right.
And Jake, and he was like, cool. I was like, okay, thanks, buddy. And then the high schoolers were just kind of there to, high schoolers. I mean, so. What else? Winter athletics are basically in full swing. Let's see. Basketball is off to a pretty solid start. They're 2-2 right now. They've won 2 straight. They have a absolutely gigantic game tomorrow night against Westboro. Westboro's 3-0, one of the better teams in Division II that they'll face. I'll give the plug. It's a huge game for the basketball team tomorrow. We're trying to sell out the gym, so if you're not doing anything, please come by. They're unveiling their brand new black uniforms that they've never had before, brand new black alternate. They're having a blackout. The student section should be gigantic. It should be a really great night for the program. I'm really excited to see how the night goes tomorrow. So that should be good. Let's see, I guess I do indoor track. So we're currently, shockingly, rarely, we are 0-2. We have tied our first 2 meets, and you never see a tie in track. And we've done it back-to-back weeks. So track is good. The girls, I believe, are 0-2, but they have been within close points as well. Girls basketball is off to a little bit of a rocky start. They're 0-3 right now, but they've been pretty competitive in their first 3 games in what they've been playing. I know swim is off to, repeating their Davenport championship last year for both boys and girls. I know the boys are 2-0-1. Actually, they just tied Olive Ames today, and Olive Ames is a very good competition for them on the other side of the league. Olive Ames is one of the better swim teams in the league. So that's good there. Is there any other sports?
Wrestling?
Oh, yes, wrestling.
Just throw them out.
I forgot wrestling. Wrestling is actually off to a great start as well. They had their annual Milford tournament last year. They had a great outing. They had, I believe, 4 champions come out of the Milford tournament. I believe that's tied most for they've ever had. Maybe, I don't know, I forget. But I know they had 4 champions, and 2 of them, I know all 4 of them, and I know they had, Ryan Hazard won, Evan Hazard, his brother, won, Nick Marcolini won. Nick Marcolini is a 4-time champ, and he also won Outstanding Wrestler for the weekend, so that's great for him. And then Carlos Tirana won. I think I pronounced that right. Carlos just came back from Brazil, so he's great to have back. But wrestling's off to a great start as well. So he's excited to see. The winter season is always a very successful season here in Milford High School, obviously. So it's good to see that the trend is just continuing. So that's really it, because we're about to go on break. Class is a little bit dying down. So that's pretty much all I got for you.
Anybody got any questions?
Go ahead.
Can I
Besides
have a couple
Jim.
of questions? Or
Besides
you want to
Jim.
go ahead, Chris?
No, go ahead.
Are you sure?
Positive.
So 2 quick. So Josh is also in the business and banking program, and I thought it'd be a great opportunity for him to give an update on what he's experienced, the companies he's visited, and what he's gleaned from the program so far, as it is focused around college readiness.
Okay. Let me answer that question. Okay.
One at a time.
So when I came in here last time, I believe I did speak briefly on that, and it has helped. We've come pretty much to the closing process, as that's only a semester course. I kind of wish it was a full year course. I have a great time there with both Mr. Rua and Mr. Dion. They're great teachers. They're showing us the right way to do things. Like my dad was saying, or Mr. Legore was saying, we have we go to various companies. We go to Dell EMC, we go to Milton Cat, go to Waters, Consigli Construction, and Milford Federal. And all those companies give us a very different experience in how we do, how they operate business. And it gives us our own point of view on how we want to conduct our own business that we're creating. So, at the end of the semester, our final is technically supposed to be a presentation and a sales pitch to, the people we've been working with in administration. So I know I've been, both the teams, there's 2 teams, and we've both been lucky enough to, I know we've both met with Dr. McIntyre, and he's helped us in, telling us about our products and all that good stuff. So it's setting us up for, college readiness. And I know that this program is very unique, because when I went on when they had the PSAT day here, and the seniors get to have like a college visit day. Me and a couple of my friends just went to Babson just to check it out because we liked, the area just to see it. And the cool thing is Babson has their own type of, I believe it's called FYB or something like that. It's freshman intro. It's like a freshman intro business class. It is essentially the same exact thing. So, and if like Babson's a very big business school, business heavy. So we essentially almost have a college type class that, students at Babson are doing their first semester as well. They have to come up with a business plan. They need to come up with a business. But the only difference is they need to find real money type deal. Like the school helps them out with it. But it's, it shows that it's something that's getting us started very early, and it's giving me a unique experience to, learn about, the business field and the different branches that come off of it, like the Magic Quadrant or something like that.
Magic Quadrant.
Very nice. So you enjoy it? Is everybody else having the same vibe?
I do. Everybody does. I mean, it's not a lot. It's not a giant class yet. I mean, HTM, hospitality, whatever it is, hospitality, tourism management. Thank you. I'm not in that, but that's kind of already got its feet in the ground. This is the second year this program's been in. I know the juniors, because you apply and you go in as a junior. I know that first year class is already bigger than mine was. So the program's already grown, probably in double, maybe triple. So
Good.
it's
That's
very
great.
good, and the growth is
Awesome.
very nice.
And if I could just jump in real quick, I have to say that both teams did an impressive job presenting their products.
Yeah.
They were very thoughtful, very reflective. You could tell it was an iterative process where they had a concept, it shifted again, it shifted. I mean, how many shifts have you guys gone through?
Well, quite a big one, because we both realized that our good pal Schoology is both our products combined. So
that was the market research question I asked you guys.
Yep, and we did it all right, and we were like, uh-oh. So,
But it's a good learning experience.
It is a good
though.
learning experience, because I don't want to say we're back to the drawing board, but with a month-ish to go. But we'll get there.
Yeah.
So,
That's great.
but it's very good.
Any other questions on the business banking? Good.
No, it's
I'm
awesome.
going a different avenue. So, just wanted to see what your plans are for next year. Obviously, it's the college application time. What schools
yeah.
have you applied to that you can share with the committee?
Well, yes, obviously. I know a lot of students here do early action or early decision. I mean, I early actioned about 5 schools. I early actioned Stonehill, Assumption, Bridgewater State, UNH. I always leave one out. And Bryant.
Yeah. And do you have a number one school that you've?
I've really
on the
teetered
list?
between. I mean, I kind of treated Bridgewater as my safety school. I really liked Assumption. But if I could pick one, I mean, Stonehill would be the one to go. I mean, I've heard back from both Bridgewater and Assumption already.
Yeah.
I've gotten to Bridgewater, I've gotten to Assumption, college.
Nice.
And I got my acceptance letter from Stonehill today and got accepted.
Hey,
Surprise.
nice.
The whole plan was to surprise you at the meeting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hope your mother's not.
Sharon knows.
That's
She
great.
thought it was her idea. I was like,
Oh, okay. Congratulations.
He was like,
That's
tell him at the meeting. I was like, all right.
So,
So there you go. MHS at work right there.
So-
3
Yeah, it's exciting.
applications, 3
Congratulations.
acceptances.
So far, I have 2
So
more
far.
left there. But I also hope to play football in school. So
yeah.
I'm
So you
hoping
got
that's-
accepted to your number one though.
pretty much.
That's excellent.
Absolutely.
Great to hear.
My 2 number ones.
Nice.
1A, 1B is basically what it was.
Awesome.
So that means I can just, phone it in, right? I'm done now. So then
We'll talk tomorrow.
we'll take that tomorrow.
So,
Anybody else?
I'm good. Congratulations, buddy.
I love how aware you are of everything that's going on, not only in the school, but across the district. I think that speaks volumes about what a close-knit community that the entire school district is. And, you mentioned Ashley earlier today, and to see all the posts on social media with the staff all around her congratulating her on the accomplishment, like, that was really touching. It just goes to show what a family the district is.
100%.
So, and the fact that you're rattling off all these teams' records and how everyone's doing, again, it just goes to show that you guys stick together, and it's a great environment.
Yeah, I love it.
I think the one thing I can say, just watching him, if I could speak as a parent for a second, is how much he made of his 4 years here. And when you think about that, you get what you put in, and I think he can honestly leave here saying that he got a lot out of it. He made a lot of friends he'll keep for a lifetime, and he got to experience a lot of different things. Talking about class officer, 3-season athlete, and he's pretty good at academics. So
Not a bad musician.
and not a bad musician. So, I mean, when we talk about what, some people leave the district feeling like they're unfulfilled, but I think there's so many options here, and there's so many avenues you can go down if you put the effort in. And I think that's where, we've done a great job at marketing the district and presenting what options are here. And again, here's an example of someone that goes down to 8th grade and talks about the step up and, what's available for you up here. So if you put the effort in, you put the time in, there are opportunities here for you. And that's the message I think, the marketing team and the district continues to promote. So and I'm proud to be part of that.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you.
Thanks,
it.
Josh.
Nice job,
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Congrats.
Appreciate it.
Well played.
Yeah, give him a round of applause.
Well played.
Cards are in my hand.
Well played.
Thank you. Bye. See you.
Mm.
I'll hug you later.
You can hug him on camera if you want. Mom would really like that,
Is Mom watching?
Jim, I can guarantee you Mom was watching.
I guarantee she was watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There you
Good night,
go.
Josh. Always makes an entrance
So we can do coaching.
and an exit.
Well done.
You got it. You got it. Yeah.
He's a piece of work. All right.
It's not genetics, Joe. I mean, you didn't get it
I
from
can
me.
tell.
That went well.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to bounce around this a little bit, just try to save some time for some people. So let's go down to report of the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum, update on instructional coaching.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, sir.
I'd like to bring 2 instructional coaches up right now. Jamie Lorendo and Kim Schmidt. So the purpose of our presentation today is to tell you a little bit about what they're doing in the schools, Jamie and Kim, and where our vision is for instructional coaching. So our vision really, I guess, is encapsulated within this quote from a book from Jim Knight, who is one of the leading experts across the nation and probably across the world in instructional coaching. But where we see instructional coaches, I guess, influencing teachers or working with teachers best is when they partner with teachers to analyze their current reality, set goals based on that reality, work on instructional strategies to, I guess, meet the goals, and then provide support as they're going through the goals within the classroom. So that's our vision for instructional coaches. They also, as you're going to find out today, have worked with teachers in a variety of other ways as well. I can say that this is happening in our schools right now. It's not happening as consistently as we want to, but I think that's to be expected with a program that's just starting out. So Jamie and Kim are our 2 instructional coaches. Jamie works at Brookside and Memorial right now, and Kim works at Woodland. But we also have other people that I would consider instructional coaches. Our 2 EL coordinators, which Jen will talk about later. A part of their job, it's right now a small part of their job, is also to get in and work directly with teachers and coach teachers around strategies for working with EL students. But we've had technology integration specialists for a while now, at least 5 years, probably longer. And their job is to work with teachers in integrating technology within what they're within the lessons that they're doing anyways. So they work hand in hand with teachers with trying to figure out how to integrate technology every day. So they're all a part of our team. One of the first things that we did was we tried to create a common understanding for instructional coaching. We formed a professional learning community. It was with myself, with Jen, Matt Joseph, and then the people that we mentioned before. We have read The Impact Cycle by Jim Knight, and that is billed as what instructional coaches should do to foster powerful improvements in teaching. And we've met bi-weekly since the beginning of the year, trying to work through this and get Jamie and Kim and the other coaches into the buildings and helping teachers. But then we've also provided Jamie and Kim with some professional development on their own, which they'll talk about a little later. And each of them have their own instructional coach on how to instructional coach. But they're also working with Jen and I, the people from Better Lesson are also working with Jen and I on how we can roll this out on a district level so that it'll be successful. And these are the four really goals of Better Lesson. They're trying to identify high leverage strategies to support the school's goals. They work with Jamie and Kim to support teachers to improve practice by giving meaningful and actionable feedback. They implement high leverage research-based systems to support teachers' use of student data and optimize teacher achievement by helping to build a culture of learning among teachers. Recently, at the beginning of December, well, last week or the week before, we gave a survey out to all the teachers at Memorial, Brookside, and Woodland. We got 95 responses back. 51% of them were from Woodland, 25 came from Brookside, and 21 came from Memorial. Obviously, it's much bigger staff at Woodland. So we were pretty pleased with the results that we got, with the amount of responses that we got back from our survey. And this is what the survey said. 52% of the people that responded had worked directly with an instructional coach already, which I think is outstanding for the short time that they've been deployed. The 23, we had a question about what kind of things were you working on with our instructional coaches. 23% of them said that they were working on instructional strategies. 21% of those that responded said they were working on guided reading, which they'll talk about. And then 11.6% of those that responded said that they were working on student engagement strategies. There was a variety of other things too. 75% rated their experience of working with instructional coaches a 4 or better out of a 6. But actually I think it's higher because I think some of the people that responded put a 1 when they didn't actually work with an instructional coach because they thought that they had to put something there in order to move the survey. So I think that's high. Well, I know it's higher. It's more like in the 80s, 8%. And then we asked a question about would you support an additional coach at your school? And 37.9 said definitely yes, but 32.6 was a maybe. So I think we need to do some more digging with that question and kind of figure out which schools were definitely the yes, maybe versus the no's. We did some initial analysis on that, and what we're seeing, again, that's really surface level. What we're seeing is that the people that have actually used coaches and rated the experience as a 4, 5, or 6 are the ones that are saying yes and maybe. People that haven't used them are more like the people that are saying no on that. So then we had this question: do you have sufficient access to coaching? And 71.6% said yes. All right. There was an open-ended question about what kind of PD do you think staff need within the school? Again, there was a whole variety of answers because it was open-ended, but these were the common themes. We saw a lot of social, emotional, and behavior management trainings that teachers were asking for. A lot of teachers are asking for ESL coaching, SEI strategies, specific content support, like in guided reading, and then technology support. So based on that, I think we have those supports in place. It's just a matter of getting them to people that actually need it or want it. And then we asked them, tell us anything you want about our coaches and the program. And there were many, many positive, specific comments in regard to Jamie and Kim and the work that they're doing, and a lot of them named both of them by their name. So that was excellent. But there were some comments like we're not sure exactly how a coach could help. some people saw coaches as a good step between administration and teachers. They felt like they could go to a coach, and a coach could go to administration if they needed some support in one area or another. This part wasn't clear at the beginning of the year, so I'm hopeful at the beginning of next year, people will use them more for this, which is setting goals. So at the beginning of every year, teachers need to set goals in their evaluation process, and a lot of teachers were looking for them to be part of that process, which they certainly can be, but I think at the beginning of this year, it was so new that people just didn't include it and wanted that to be part of it. So that's good. And then there were some questions about, well, I think this was back to, would you support instructional coaches, additional instructional coaches? There was this question that came up a couple times. Well, we would, but we want to know what the impact of coaching is compared to hiring additional staff in the classroom. And then finally, there was a couple comments about the fact that it was tough to share between buildings. So that's coming from Jamie having to be between Brookside and Memorial. So that was that's some of the results of the survey. I think it was positive for us, and I think it also reinforced what we're already doing. Yeah, so you can see there's a clear line of where one presentation ends and one begins. So from here, I'm going to let Kim and Jamie take over.
We wanted us to change the slides.
I like color. I'm Kim Schmidt. I'm the instructional coach at Woodland. A lot of you already know Jamie, just because she's been in the district more, but I know I'm a new face. So being that it is a new position that we're rolling out, we have a lot of goals for the year, but if we really had to boil it down to kind of our top two priorities, the first is really building relationships with teachers. If they don't trust us and if they don't sort of value what we have to say, then it's never going to work. So that's one of our main focuses this year, is building those relationships and kind of building a reputation for ourselves with teachers as somebody that they can trust and somebody that can really help support them in their needs. And the other is really to educate teachers on what instructional coaching is, how it works, and how it could benefit them. Which is something that, based on the survey, and Craig had mentioned that a lot of teachers had commented, like, how would this help them? That's something that we're continuing to work on, to show teachers kind of what we do and how we could support them. I think as the position grows, that gets a little bit easier, because we are keeping our coaching sessions confidential with teachers, but they are actually talking to each other. So they'll kind of sometimes share what they're doing with us, and as word spreads, that makes our job a little bit easier, because they're kind of helping us spread what we're doing and how we can help them.
And as the year has gone on, we've realized some things have come up that we didn't anticipate in this position. So I think that now that we've had 4 months to see what people are asking for, now we have a better response when we come back, with some communication after the break to let them know, well, these are, like you said, some of the things that we've been trying. It was things that at least I didn't anticipate going into the role. So, right? That's okay. Yeah, so again, building relationships. One of the things that we did first was present at the staff meetings, and we just gave a brief overview of what the role entails, what our position is supposed to be, what they can expect if they are to meet with us. So it was a very brief overview. We did refer to the impact cycle, as Craig mentioned, by Jim Knight, as kind of a common language or format that we would be using. So we talked about that there. We followed up by going to TCT meetings, so we had an opportunity to talk with smaller groups, and then gave them time to ask further questions, if they had them, and then just informal conversations throughout the building. Sometimes it's important just to talk to them about what they did over the weekend, not necessarily think that every time that they talk with us that it has to be about coaching. So that's been a pretty important part of my job at both schools, getting to know all of the teachers well, is just having those informal conversations. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to complete a cycle, or they have to sit down and set up times to meet with me, but they could just say, let me run something by you. So there's been a mix of that too. So again, talking about, one of our main goals is building that relationship, that they know that we're not going to go to administration if they come to us. The principals do not know who we're working with. We sent a clear message that we would share needs, whether it's grade level or we see a need in a certain content area, but that no names would ever be divulged unless it was okay with them. Sometimes I've said to teachers, do you mind if I share this part of our conversation? And if they agree, then that's one thing. But I really feel that that's something that could make or break the position if they ever felt that we were going back to administration with what they were saying.
That was the same thing, right?
I think so. No, go back, because there's a little bit more. I think that's the first one. But in terms of what we are actually really talking to administration about, it's more general conversations about teaching and learning. So what are we seeing as needs that the administration can support, and what is administration seeing on their walkthroughs and their classroom observations that we can help support with PD? So again, not with specific teachers, but just in general, we're noticing that the staff is really strong in this area, but they could use some additional support in that area, and that helps us focus our work.
So how we are supporting teachers. So one of the biggest things is creating that coaching cycle. So if a teacher approaches me and says, my schedule seems to be all over the place, I have the time, but I don't know how to fit everything into those time periods, especially if they're all broken up. So we might start off with the cycle and say, okay, so you've just identified the reality of that this may be a little bit of an issue for you. What would be your main objective that you'd like to meet first? And really focusing in on what is most important for them. If it came down to scheduling, what are they trying to make more time for? What do they think they could cut out? And then developing strategies together to meet that objective. So typically what happens with the cycle is once we create that together, then we set up a time where I could go in and observe, and again, emphasizing that it's we're not evaluating them, not judging them going in. That's an important part of creating those relationships as well, is that we're not administrators. We're not there to say, you're doing this wrong. How are we supposed to help you with this? So going in and observing just gives us a talking points for when we come back and we reflect together. So the way the cycle works is if they don't meet the objective, then we sit down again and develop new strategies until the objective is met. Some teachers it's really quick, depending on what they're asking about, and sometimes it takes longer, so it just depends. Other things that we've worked on is behavior management. If they don't have a system in place, whether it be incentive or consequences, we've worked on cycles for that. Student engagement, Kim has done some great collection of data for engagement, things that you would think would be really difficult to measure. She's managed to do that and show teachers how that can work, and student discourse. And then the professional development, over the past few months, teachers have approached me and said, I really want to revamp how I do guided reading. Can you help me with that? So what has ended up happening is that so many people were asking me, so I decided, well, maybe we could put a PLC together. Instead of trying to work with 20 different people at 2 different schools, the time wouldn't be manageable. So we created the PLC. I sent out an email and said, these are the 5 components of what the PLC would look like. We're going to use a mentor text, not to necessarily have them read the whole thing, but just using the videos, picking snippets, and then having them follow that coaching cycle within the PLC. So Brookside is a little bit more further ahead. So what they've been able to do in analyzing assessments, connecting assessments to their instruction, they've been able to identify the reality and set objectives and go back with a group into their classroom. And then 2 weeks later, when they come back, they share what they did and how it went reflected. So that whole coaching piece is worked into the PLC. Memorial has just joined on, which is great. So I have about 19 people at Memorial, and about kindergarten is doing it as a grade level, and I have about 20 that do it throughout between 1st and 2nd grade. So it was a really, really great response, and I've gotten a lot of good feedback. And they actually responded in the survey too, which will be interesting to see when we look at what school that was coming from. Is it Woodland that's asking for more guided reading, or is it more people that just want more access to that? That's something that we can look at. And then do you want to talk about the literacy series?
So at Woodland, starting in January, we're calling it the Woodland Literacy Series, and it's going to be after-school professional development, basically every other week from January to May, on a range of topics that were things that were either what administration was noticing as needs and what teachers were asking for support with. So ranging from guided reading, a few sessions on phonics, writing, vocabulary, disciplinary literacy. What I'm excited about is 2 things. One is that teachers have started signing up, and we're seeing a good response, which is great considering that we're asking them to stay for an extra hour on Wednesdays, and sometimes, you know, even if you want to, just life gets in the way and you can't do that. So we're seeing a really good number of teachers that are responding that want to join. The other thing that I think is exciting about it is that it's not me presenting every session. So I'm facilitating a few, but there's also reading specialists that are doing some classroom teachers that are sharing their knowledge. So it's exciting to get some of the teachers involved and sharing their expertise in certain areas. So one thing that has been a big topic of conversation this year between us and Craig is how are we going to measure our impact? That even came up in our interviews for the position. Jamie and I were talking about today how I think in my interview, Craig that was one of the questions, and Craig asked me a few follow-ups. I was like, I don't know if this is good or bad, but I guess it was good. But it's a tricky thing to figure out how effective is our position. So a few ways that we're trying to do that to start off. One is really looking at the teacher reflections when they're done with a cycle and almost getting their story of how they felt this benefited them. The staff survey, is obviously a big help to look at how they're rating their experience with instructional coaching and how they feel it impacts students. We also, within coaching cycles, try to find some way to gather data so we can actually look at real numbers. So it's not subjective, but it is, we can really measure it. So Jamie mentioned engagement. You know, a teacher I worked with was worried about engagement, so we figured out a system to have students sort of self-rate their engagement. And we did that over a series of time and tried a bunch of different strategies. And the teacher started to feel like, yeah, I really think they're more engaged. We surveyed them again, and their engagement had gone up. So we were really able to look at firm data. It wasn't just her thinking, yeah, I think things are better, but we're able to look at numbers and say, yes, this is how much they improved. And then really just informal feedback from teachers that we're working with and trying to get more and more of that, of how they think it's going, is kind of where we are right now.
And I mean, ultimately, it's about the student impact, but that's going to take a little bit of time before we can catch on to see how that's affecting them. So right now, it's been very clear to see the impact we've had on teaching and their instruction. And then I actually had a teacher that came back to me today and said, oh, what we talked about in the PLC, I went back and tried it, and you know, the student went up 2 levels on the Dolch, and I can't wait to give her a running record. So that was just a little snippet of, okay, that is impacting the student from something that she did in the PLC. So seeing bits and pieces of it is great, but seeing it as a whole is probably going to take a little bit of time. So as Craig mentioned, Better Lesson, such a great website. We've had some time to really work with it. There's a lot of resources. We work with a coach, and we meet with her virtually every other week. Her name is Africa, and she's awesome. And I don't know if it was a coincidence that we both ended up with her, but it's great that we did, because we can talk about conversations and refer to each other, and she kind of knows what we're doing together as a duo.
And we meet with her on the same day too.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll start a conversation. I'll say, talk to Jamie about that too, because she was wondering. So it's
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. So there's the platform there is, we have our own goals that we have to set. We have evidence that we need to add. We have to reflect on what our growth looks like. And then talking to her is just really that one piece, but she's great. If we have a situation that we are not sure how to handle, she's just very knowledgeable and willing to help. So she provides resources, and then there's other resources that I found that could be given to teachers. So it really has been a great resource for us as coaches. And then the Impact Cycle, as Craig mentioned, is the book that we read in our PLC with him. And a lot of the tools or forms that Kim has been able to use in student discourse and engagement have come from that book. So there's a lot of great resources. He's a great thinker, and he has a lot of information out there, and so it's been very beneficial, I think.
So as we're moving forward with, I guess it's more than half a year left, but it feels like the second half of the year, one of our next steps is to continue to educate staff on the benefits of coaching and how that works. And based on the results of that survey, we know we still have some work to do there. We're continuing to figure out ways to monitor the impact of instructional coaching and kind of gather that data and gather that evidence to show how it is impacting student learning. And then figuring out how the best way to work with both building and district administration to figure out what is our role in professional development and how we can support the district and buildings with their professional development needs. Do you have any questions?
That's it, right?
That's it,
That's it, right?
yeah.
I'll open up if anyone has any questions. Megan?
Sorry. It's so exciting. I think it definitely has the potential to make a huge impact. I know it's the first year, so maybe this just isn't relevant yet. Is there some thought or discussion around identifying new teachers and really kind of pulling them into the program? Or is it better to kind of give new teachers some time to kind of find their ground and see what questions they have?
I think an important piece is that this is completely voluntary right now, and that people do not have to work with us. And I think not putting pressure on anybody is important. So we really have waited for people to come to us.
Okay.
We always chime in and say we're here for you and let them know that we're available. But as far as seeking people out, does that answer your question? Not yet.
Okay.
It needs to be voluntary with no pressure, because then they're invested. If it's something that they really want to do and they want to develop whatever it is that they're doing, they'll be more open-minded toward it. Yeah.
And I think new teachers also have that added advantage of having the mentor. So one thing we were talking about in the PLC and looking at the data is trying to figure out where are the teachers that are working with us in terms of their years? You know, are they the teachers who've been there for 4 or 5 years that have phased out of mentoring and are now realizing, but I still need help with these?
Sure.
So, you know, there are a number of new teachers that come forward and they're very excited, but there's also a lot that I know rely on their mentors for support.
Okay, great. And Jimmy, you talked about it a little bit in terms of grouping. You have, you know, a bunch of people with the same issues, so let's group them together. How would you kind of describe your overall bandwidth in terms of the numbers that want to participate in the program? At this point, are we able to get to everyone, or just, I know it's the first year, so it takes time, I think, even for the awareness to be there, but.
Mm-hmm.
Do you mean, are we able to get to everyone that wants to?
Exactly, currently.
At Woodland, yes.
Okay.
I think it's a little bit more just logistically.
Yeah.
2 schools.
Yeah, I mean,
Tricky.
it's tricky going between 2 schools. And, you know, at Brookside, I have a space there. And it makes it easier for me to walk by people in the hallway and see them.
Sure.
To go over to Memorial and not have a space, I have to just walk around.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go and just, like, walk into classrooms.
Sure.
So it does make it trickier. So I go over there, and I'm in contact with them as much as I can. I'm glad that they signed up for the PLC, because it gives me more opportunity to be there, and that's a good way for them to get to know me.
Okay.
So as far as managing 2 buildings, it is a little bit tricky just because I'm not there all the time.
Okay.
And not for a matter of not wanting to be, but
Sure.
it's kind of awkward, like I said, to just go and walk around.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but I mean, they clearly have the same amount of access as Brookside.
Yep. Excellent.
And the principals have been great about getting substitutes on those
Oh,
days
great.
of the PLC, so nobody has had to have been turned down.
Oh, excellent.
And then I know, like, we're looking forward to next year too, with being able to offer it to people that didn't do it this year.
Great.
So.
And then Kim, maybe could you speak to it all? Have you had any involvement or any output from the iReady? Have you been involved sort of with teachers?
Yeah, so actually I was lucky because I was in Medway last year where we piloted iReady.
Awesome.
So that was kind of a good in with a lot of teachers that I was able to send an email after the first iReady training to say, just so you know, I have experience with this. And I got a lot of emails back. So that's been great. And one thing I've been able to do is work with teachers in looking at the data, both in helping them kind of figure out and navigate the program and what reports they want to see, but then taking it to the next step and talking about how is that going to impact instruction. So definitely the iReady's, it's been a great tool for me to get some relationships with teachers.
That sounds great. Thanks. Thanks, Jen.
You good?
I just real quick, one of the things I was worried about is how the teachers were gonna react to you guys being in the schools with them. In the survey, you know, thank you for the survey, Craig, you know, 52% of them that did it said either they enjoyed the experience. That tells a lot, but how do you guys feel? You get that vibe that they're running towards you? Some of them are, and some of them are just like, I don't want to deal with anybody teaching me how to do anything. I mean, you get more of a personal vibe because you guys are there all the time. And that's one of the concerns I was worried about.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely those who are running to us that really want to work. And I don't get the vibe that people who aren't working with us, you know, it's not because they're like anti-instructional
Right.
coaching, or it's more, and I think this was part of the survey as well, one of the questions was the reason, if they're not working, why not? And a lot of them was if they feel like they don't have time, or what we had mentioned before, like they're not sure how we could help.
Right.
So I think that's one thing that in part of our education, we need to help them realize that, like, yes, it takes time to work with us, but that time pays off. And it's really not that much time because, you know, part of that time is us being in your classroom when you're teaching anyway. So, you know, I don't see people that are really, like, running away from coaching per se. It's just that they haven't quite figured out how it works for them, if that makes sense.
No, it does, absolutely. Thank you.
It's an important message to send them, especially when I think through the PLCs, that I say to them, I'm not here to teach you about guided reading. I have a lot of experience just because of my prior positions in the district. But I'm like, I'm not here to teach, I'm a facilitator. And I think getting that message out that we're not experts in everything. I don't know everything about what you're teaching in math or science or social studies, but instruction is instruction no matter which content area you're looking at. And it's about forming that partnership and working together, not us going in and saying, you're not doing that correctly, or this would be a better way. That's just not the approach that we've taken from the beginning. And that precedent being set right from the beginning is so important for, what you're talking about. And just that goes along with that part of that trust. If people feel like they can put their vulnerability aside and know that they can come and say, I'm not doing well and I don't want to be set up to fail, they've been honest. And I
Right.
think it's just led to really good relationships.
And that, right off the bat, telling them too, that we're not gonna go rat you out, we're not part of
No.
the administration, we're, that stays with them, you stay with us. And I think that helps out a lot too, so teachers are like, oh, all right,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna get judged like you said earlier, so I think that's a positive.
And to be more of an advocate for them
Mhm.
and know that we're not like on either side, and just to advocate for them. And I think they believe it. So the survey results, I think, were definitely
Absolutely.
good.
Yes.
So you're
Thank you.
getting feedback from the teachers, and I guess how does that process work, or have you been able to talk to administration yet about some of the feedback that you're getting, and is it how's the conversation going there from that side of it, and do you also talk to the curriculum team leaders? How do you present that feedback, I guess, to curriculum team leaders and to administration?
So you're talking about the survey particularly, or just
Well,
like general feedback?
Just in
we
general
get?
feedback that you're getting from the teachers that may be a little bit more hesitant to come up, present an idea to administration, so you're kind of that bridge to them. That's an anonymous bridge too, which is a nice feature.
Right. Eric, and again, I guess this is another thing about going between two schools. Like, because I'm at Brookside, Eric and I have a really good working relationship. Like, I'm able to go to him and just say, a few teachers have talked to me about this. They've either said that they're really liking it. Foundations was kind of a hot topic in the beginning of the year because it still wasn't fully in place yet. Like, second grade was just the first year for a few people, and there was some anxiety around it. But I was able to, they would say that, and I would be able to go and talk to him and say, this is what the concerns are for some people, and this is what they're saying is going really well. And it's the same thing with the CTLs. We can't share with them either who we're working with. But I think just keeping it anonymous, but giving enough information so that we can try to look in a direction that would be helpful. And then being able to go back to that teacher and say, I, spoke about this, and I would never go to Eric without saying to somebody, can I talk about this with him as a need, leaving the name out. So it's that really that whole trust piece that's so important, to be able to have that open relationship with the principals.
Sounds like, you're reducing that stress
Yeah.
level within.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the survey results are clearly a direct reflection on both of you. The teachers trust you, and it's such a unique position that you really need to have a certain personality, and clearly both of you do. You bring a lot of credibility, and I think teachers, again, they trust you, and they're willing to open up to you and share some of their concerns. So that goes a long way. I know Keith, Craig, last year you put together a 3-year plan for the instructional coaches. So do you see us moving into phase 2 this year as part of the budgeting process?
Yeah, with a little bit of a change.
Okay.
I'm not sure, based on results of the survey, I'm not sure that we're ready for another coach at this level. But I think putting a coach at Stacy, I think would be the next move in moving through the phases. I could see something like this being a great addition to what's happening at Stacy already. And I could see an instructional coach moving between teams and really tightening up instructional practices at that school.
Yeah. And where did the curriculum directors play into all of that?
That were part of the
3-year
plan.
Yeah.
I'm putting those up again too.
I would hope so.
Did he put you up to that?
We were just talking about it.
Because this feels a little like a setup.
So as part of that plan, I'm gonna push for a math director and a literacy director. But I see coaches fitting under them, and again, coaches is kind of being almost between the director and the principal as part of this greater plan of tightening content areas. So if it was math, the director would have some kind of need that they're seeing, or they're rolling out professional development. And where we always fall down when we bring in somebody for professional development is the follow-up. So instructional coaches would go attend whatever it was, say it was on discourse or something. We have somebody that comes in and talks to the staff about student discourse. It's great, I learned a whole lot, but nobody's helping me implement it in school. So that's where I see coaches helping the most. They're taking whatever it is that's being taught and then working directly with teachers on how to implement it. So, I don't know, does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah,
or
no,
is that-
I wanted to confirm that you're bringing that back.
Oh, yeah.
This year, so all right.
And more.
Sorry, Craig, I think the way that you rolled it out was really the only way for it to be effective, and I think to see the trust that you've built is so important. Is there a plan at some point that we would target teachers that we think maybe could use some more assistance? Like, at what point does that get traction, or is that not what these coaches would
No, I we've kicked that around a lot,
Mhm.
and I just don't think it's effective.
Okay.
I think if we tell somebody that you have to use this coach, I think it's gonna send the wrong message to the rest of the staff, right? Because now we're saying that you're an ineffective teacher, you need to go see the coach, so now nobody else is gonna wanna see the coach because I'm not an ineffective
I guess I wasn't thinking it would be exclusively that, but that would be a component. So they wouldn't, someone else wouldn't know if you were in the room, it's because you're doing
One of the
bad.
things we've seen when we looked at other programs where it wasn't successful is when, like, I think it starts with the best of intentions to really help people that might be struggling in a particular area. But what happened is the coaches almost became like, we're in here to kind of intervene because, not good things are happening.
Okay.
So then there's a stigma to working
Okay.
with a coach, and we're really trying to avoid
Sure.
that. And we're almost taking the same approach that we did with technology, where we're not really mandating, a certain amount of use or percentage or anything like that. We're really just trying to get people engaged with the coaches. And I can tell you, the first week or two, you're always a little nervous when you start something new because you're like, what's going to happen? And it started slow, but it's picked up. And your dance cards are booked all the time now.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so I think that it's meeting kind of the purpose with the belief that we believe all teachers can improve.
Sure.
And if someone is struggling, we have a number of things that we do put in place,
Okay.
just like we do for brand new teachers. So this is kind of hitting everybody. So someone who's doing great and wants to be even better can jump in, or someone who's struggling with a particular thing or across the board can jump in and use the coaches. So there's no stigma attached to the coaching process. It's really the belief that everybody can be better and everybody can improve.
And when you look at the percentage of the maybes in the future, that's very encouraging. Because if you can sway the maybes, you really can. And I think when you are able to work with influential people within the building and it's a positive experience for them, like Kim said, they start talking to each other and they say, hey, look what just happened. This was awesome. So to see that all of those maybes, a lot of them probably will be yeses by the end of the year. It's very encouraging to see that.
Great. Thanks.
So just to that point, and I know you don't want to mandate it, but just out of curiosity, as part of the evaluation process, if the evaluator identifies some area for improvement, they have a conversation with the individual, do they make the recommendation that, hey, here are your options, you might want to consider meeting with somebody?
That's, honestly, that's not a conversation I've had with principals, because it's so new.
Right.
But I can ask that question. But again, I think it's a very careful line to draw, because it's almost like backdooring the same thing kind of Meg was talking about, because we really...
I could see it in the way that you're explaining it, where I'm having a conversation with somebody, but I wouldn't want to see it written into the evaluation that in order for you to improve, you must meet with the coach next year, or something like that. I think the best way for us to, I guess, work with teachers that need the support is to just keep keep getting out there the message of what it is that we do. You know, these are the different ways that we can help you. And I think if as long as we keep getting that out, I think the teachers will find us, especially if they're feeling like their back's against the wall. So.
And the PD you guys are presenting too is a great, like, I think it's a great PD just on its own, but it's also a phenomenal marketing opportunity. And to Craig's point earlier, like, I'm becoming more and more a believer in embedded professional development, which we saw like with the instructional technology folks, and now with our coaches. You just get more, I think, dollar for dollar benefit from it, because you know, when somebody does a presentation, you try it in your classroom, and you're like, it seemed like it went okay, but you're kind of doing it in a vacuum. And this way, if you know somebody wants to try something or change something, they're going to get feedback from somebody that's kind of objective. It's not evaluative, and it's a nice partnership, so they can really kind of carry it through.
Thank you, guys.
Well,
Very nice.
thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Next on the agenda, ELA program update.
Do you want to try to do can I do the warrant while we're waiting for the tech setup, just in the interest of efficiency?
It's your show, right?
It's our show, baby.
I have for the committee's approval this evening, a total of all warrants in the amount of $862,195.68.
I get a motion to approve that warrant. Motion from Megan, second by Jim. All in favor? Thank you, Kathy.
The next item is the FY19 budget update. I do want to bring your attention to our out-of-district line that has fallen into a deficit. There does seem to be a trend, and it's not just in Milford. We're learning more and more communities and districts are faced with the out-of-district incline in terms of numbers going out. So we will have to watch that deficit over the next few months, and hopefully we trend down a little bit moving forward. But it also affects our FY20 budget as well, with the new students going out of district.
Kathy, is there a point in the year at which we wouldn't transfer them? Like, is there a cutoff, or could someone leave in May? It could go at any point. Yeah,
No.
okay. Thanks.
Unfortunately. It's always a volatile budget line. That's
Yep.
why you just have to watch it so closely and make sure that all of your purchase orders and your tuition encumbrances are very up to date month to month. It's very important. It's critical. And the committee also has a list of the latest hires from our previous meeting. No vote is required. And that's all I have,
That's it?
Mr.
Perfect.
Chair.
Thank you, Kathy. Jen, how are you tonight?
Good, how are you guys?
Good, thank you.
So in front of you, you should have a packet. It does say November 15th. I was supposed to present the day that we got snow, but I didn't want to reprint everything. I did update a few slides in here that you might not have in yours, and I can share them with you. I'll have Melissa share them with you. So tonight, I would like to go over this year, 18-19 EL demographics, projected EL population numbers for next school year, 19-20. Give you some feedback around what's going on with the look bill. Last year, when I presented, it was the same day that Baker signed the law into effect, and now we've had a whole year of the state writing regulations and getting them released slowly. So I have some updates for you and some that are still in process. An overview of our data implications and what does that mean coming up for us, and a few department highlights, end with the highlights, right? So, and then provide you time to ask any questions that you may have. So, just quickly, you'll see throughout the slides, EL, that's an English learner who's currently in our program. A former English learner is a student that we are monitoring for 4 years under ESSA, and first language not English means they could be an English learner, but it's not synonymous with English learners. You'll see that our percentage in our district of first language not English is higher than our English learners. That just means that they're coming from a home that speaks a language other than English. So last year when I was here, we had 656 students. This year we're at 705, and today when I ran the numbers, we're at 717. This is K through 12. This doesn't include our preschool program. Which brings us up to 17% of our student body, K to 12. And I want to reiterate, that's our English learners. Those are the students who are currently in the program. And so when you look at that across the district, these are the numbers according to November 8th. I did take out our preschool program because we're not required at this time to provide explicit instruction at the preschool. Also, our students were sending out of district, and so we're at 17%, and the numbers at the bottom show you where specifically those numbers are at. So right now at Brookside, we're 28% English learners. Memorial, 34% of the student body are English learners. 19.5% at Woodland, 10% at Stacy, 9.9 at Milford High School. The decrease from, again, like from Brookside, Memorial, and Woodland means we're doing our job. Second language acquisition shows 5 to 7 years for mastery. The state has determined a 6-year benchmark, the state of Massachusetts, and so we're looking to have our students being reclassified at the latest at the end of 5th grade if they started kindergarten with us. So that's why you see the drastic cut from Woodland to Stacy, because we're doing a good job. And if the 10% is still there, that the majority of the time that tends to be our newly arrived students or students who have been in the program for less than 6 years. Now, if we add our students who we're overseeing through a monitoring process, under the Look Law, it's a more intense process. So I want to talk to you about that when we get to that slide, but right now, looking at the student population, you can see the difference from the previous slide of saying, oh, Woodland has 19%, but no, really, we're overseeing 31% of the student population. 27% of Stacy in comparison to the 10% on the previous slide, and 15 here at the high school compared to 9% on the previous slide. So when we really look at which students in the district are in the ELE program, it's 26% of the student body, 1 in every 4 students. What does this, how does Milford compare to Mass? This is new numbers. First language not English, we're at 30.1%. This is what's up on DESE's website currently, and that's for school year 17-18. But Lisa Beyer just sent out our new our SIMS data from October 1st, and our actual percentage of first language not English being reported for next year is 33.3%. So 1 in every 3 students across our district needs an interpreter when we call home.
And that doesn't seem like, if you don't mind if I jump in, that doesn't seem like a big jump, but it's a 10% increase. So it's pretty significant.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually show you in this slide our first language not English percentage growth over the last 8 years, because you can see that in 11-12, that's actually my first year starting as the EL program director, we were at 17% of the families speaking the language that's not English at home, and now we're at 33.3%. So it's a really large increase in a short amount of time. I feel like as a director, my time has flown by, and that increase has kept me busy. Maybe that's why time flies when you're having fun. So our population, over several years ago, I was here presenting to you probably the reverse. We had more Spanish-speaking students coming in, specifically from Ecuador and Guatemala, and this year, and the last 2 years, we haven't seen an increase in our Spanish-speaking population, but mostly students coming from Brazil. So a large increase from Brazil, and we're not really seeing anybody coming into the Family Resource Center that are Spanish-speaking families. Last year we did but they were specifically from Puerto Rico, from the hurricane and displacement. but if all of our Spanish-speaking students are mostly coming into the kindergarten. They're born here in Milford, but not newly immigrated. And then if we add our English learners and our former English learners, you can see that changes a bit, but just wanted to give you both data. Here's what I'm thinking for next year, for 1920. I usually have been able to pretty much accurately predict over every year, and it's kind of like a fun game for me now. So each year now we're pretty much averaging about 2%, 1%. I'm going to go with the 1.5% this coming year, just for everything that we've been seeing. This might be lowball this year, just because it's really unpredictable with the political climate and financial climate of Brazil right now, and that's the only reason why I'm saying this might be undershot, but it's so hard to predict. So I'm saying a gain of 60 English learners, but that also takes into account students that are going to be reclassified. So like a couple slides back, last year, if you look in the third column where it says FEL, school year 18-19, all the way at the bottom row, you can see that 144 of our 373 former English learners are in year 1, which means last year we reclassified 144 students in our school district. So they're in their year 1 of monitoring, of a 4-year monitoring process. So if we reclassify around that many every year, between 120 and 140, and then we also get the incoming kindergarten class and any move-ins, that's why I'm saying it's probably going to be a gain of 60 students to the EL component of the program, because about 140 will move to the FEL part of the program. But how does that affect us now with the language opportunity for our kids bill? There is different components of the bill, and one of them being around language acquisition programming flexibility. We have more flexibility in the programs that we have in our district, more local voice. The SEI only component that was voted in 2002 has gone away, and we really have the ability to create programs that we see that are in the best interest of the students who are attending our schools every day. What that looks like is language opportunity for our kids. It was created by MAFLA, which is a Massachusetts of Foreign Language Association, MABE, Massachusetts of Bilingual Ed, and MATSAW, Massachusetts Teaching of Second Language, English as a Second Language. So those three advocated to say all of our kids need to be bilingual. All of our kids, whether they're native English speakers or immigrating, to be competitive in today's world. If we're really looking at having students to be college ready, they need to be bilingual at this point. How interconnected our world has become. So really being able to create, do we want to move down the road? Do we want to move to dual language programs? Do we want to have bilingual programs? Do we want to have two-way immersion programs? Those are all something I can talk to you at a later date. We're not there yet, so I don't want that, and I'm not projecting any of that in the near future for us. But those are options for us to consider. There's going to be an increased input from parents and guardians. There's a required district required to create an LPAC, an English Learner Parent Advisory Council, which is very similar to the Special Education Parent Advisory Council. So the department has just released guidelines, and you have 6 months to put those in place. Those were released just a couple weeks ago. In the last meeting that I went to with the Department of Education, they're asking districts to roll that out for the beginning of the next school year. So we have time to put in place what that will look like in our district now that we have the state guidelines. There's also new guidelines around educator qualifications, stricter qualifications for being ESL licensed, and making sure that the teachers who are teaching English learners are qualified. And the biggest piece that I wanted to talk to you about is around benchmarks for English learners. So right now we have our student growth percentages with MCAS. You guys are very aware of looking at MCAS scores. Well, now we have those same for Access for English Learners, which is our state assessment for English language proficiency growth. students are going to be given benchmarks on where they're at in their growth to attaining English proficiency within that 6-year requirement. So the state says it's a 6-year requirement by the time they need to meet attainment. So every year they're going to say, okay, a student grew this much, now next year they're going to have to grow this much. Like how much are they going to have to grow every year in order to make that attainment? And they have a projected target for that student, and if that student doesn't make that annual target, they're going to be provided a student growth percentage that is going to put them in low progress, and they're going to be required to be placed on a student success plan. It's great for our students because we want them to meet their targets and get to growth, but that means a lot more paper and meetings, because part of those meetings are parent voice. Just because special education is something that we're all very familiar with, English Learner Department is going to very much be mirroring some of those meetings. So if a student falls into a student growth template, like a plan that they need to have, there needs to be somebody overseeing it. The teacher needs to be involved, the EL teacher needs to be involved, the parent needs to be there, student goals, how are we going to get the student to attainment? So it's sort of legal required paperwork in meetings. And then that's all around data reporting. The last piece is also, well, there's 2 other pieces of the bill, which is the state of the seal of biliteracy, and how are we creating a seal that can go on the graduation diploma, saying our students have met a certain proficiency level, whether they're English learners or native learning a foreign language. They have the ability to get the seal of biliteracy. I've been collaborating with Liz Allegrezza, who's the world language CTL here at the high school. The guidelines around the seal of biliteracy are not yet published, but we're in the process of creating a plan on how can we work collaboratively to ensure that our students have access to getting the seal of biliteracy. And then the last piece of the seal of the last piece of the Look Act is pre-K. So now including pre-K. So a few minutes ago I said pre-K wasn't included. We didn't have to provide explicit instruction, but we're not required to apply to provide explicit English language development, but we're required to do regularly monitoring and consultation with teachers, with their teachers. So going in to observe and monitor and document and consult with teachers and provide professional development to teachers to then work with students. So it's a lot more legal requirements under the Look Law, which means there will need to be additional supports because we just don't have the current manpower to meet all the compliance regulations around the Look Law. So one is, which this isn't a compliance piece, but you will see that if 33.3% of our students need somebody else to call home for them, like our teachers, many of our teachers are not bilingual and they can't do it themselves, although they would love to. It requires a call to the Family Resource Center. We have one full-time position in our district as the translation coordinator, one person managing 33.3% of our family phone calls. So there is a need for additional interpretation and translation staff for families with first language not English. Building-based EL coordinators for each school. I know last year when I presented my budget, I was hoping to, knowing that this was just signed into effect and that we could create like a phase-in process. We have Samantha Hinnon, who is currently working as the K-5 EL coordinator, and Kelly Sabini, who is working as the 6 to 12 EL coordinator. I'm hoping to see eventually one at each school, just like a team chair, like to manage all the EL paperwork and cumulative paperwork and state assessments and meetings. But with pre-K coming on the line too, I think that there's a need to move one of the positions to pre-K to 3 and having someone full-time at Woodland, because that's where our largest numbers are, is at Woodland. So additional ESL teachers to instruct our growing numbers. So if we're having 60 more students or students with different varying needs, we're going to need more teachers. And continued PD, you saw that in the survey that went out to the staff around instructional coaching. They're like, wow, our demographics are really changing, and I really need to change my practice, because how I taught many years ago is not currently working with our changing demographics. And so providing our teachers continued instructional coaching and PD with working with English learners. Early intervention for pre-K English language development, and a committee to research new EL programmatic opportunities. So if these are our demographics, what do we want to offer long-term? And how do we prepare ourselves as a district long-term to meet the needs and of the requests that are coming from our LPAC, from our parents in the community. Some highlights that are happening. Last year at this time, I also told you that we won a national professional development grant from from federal government, working with Framingham State University to provide a free master's program in TESOL, teaching English as a second language. Last year I presented to you that there was 19 teachers. The other districts that are working collaboratively with us in this grant had some teachers step back, so of course I ran and said, well, we'll take those. So we have 22 teachers now this year. We've gained 3 more teachers into the master's program, which is excellent for us. We're the smallest district participating in the program, and we have almost half of the seats. So I'm really excited, and that speaks to the continuous growth that our teachers want and how they want to serve the students who are in front of them. So I'm really proud of our district. Anna Cahill was hired as our Family Resource Center manager, and Juliana Middlecote has been hired as our district interpretation and translation coordinator. And we're really blessed to have her. She has children who grew up in our district. She's just so devoted to our community, and if you haven't met her, I encourage you to introduce yourself, because she's an exceptional woman and big heart. So our EL and SEI core content Milford High School teachers are in a co-teaching partnership. Thank you for approving that last year when Mr. Otling came to talk about the need for co-teaching model at the high school level for students with disabilities and the English Learner Program. Both departments have collaborated, our EL and special education departments, on this co-teaching, and we're really seeing benefits for the students at the high school level. Woodland had an EL potluck, family potluck, and they did it and planned it perfectly right at the same time as parent conference signups. And so as parents were coming in strategically, for potluck, there was Caridad, the assistant principal, signing families up in Spanish, and Rosemary Ferreira, who's the secretary, signing families up in Portuguese. And we had a really high participation rate at Woodland Elementary for parent conferences. And I just wanted to highlight and say kudos to Tim and his crew, because they did an exceptional job of family engagement that evening and getting parents involved academically too as a follow-up. And then our EL coordinators participating in the district instructional coaching and the PLC. I think it's really powerful when people are speaking the same voice, and so when instructional coaching came on board last year, and I know that I came and presented to you about instructional coaching as well, and with the EL coordinators coming in and that being a part of their role as an assistance for working with English learners, that we're speaking the same language, we're going through the same instructional coaching cycle, and that whether I need help, if I want to go to someone for guided reading, but I also want to go to someone else for EL, we're still doing and saying the same language, and so that's been really important. And I talked a really long time. So do you have any questions for me about all of this information I presented?
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I don't have full knowledge of the look bill, but obviously, I'm knowledgeable about the IEP process.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like it's certainly that the Look Act is going to implement kind of paperwork similar to an IEP. I guess, is that framework, has that been established? When's that starting to come from the state level and down to the school level?
So it's aligned to access for ELs.
Yeah.
So because it's aligned to the benchmarks, those benchmarks will come out in June, so it won't be put into place until next school year as well. So in June, the first week in June, they'll release the scores.
Mm-hmm.
Then they come back in the beginning of July and provide their targets, because they correlate it, they have all the data, like teams working on that. And so it will be put in place for next school year.
Next school year. So
So we
basically-
never know, but I looked back on the last 2 years of data to say, if we were doing that, if I was looking at all the students who didn't make student growth percentage in the past 2 years, on average, what would be the caseload? And so at the first time a student can be put on a student success plan is grade 2, because K is their base level, then they get the scores at the end of first grade, so the first time they can go is at the beginning of second grade. So really your student success plans are gonna start 2 and higher. So 2 through 5 was a caseload of 60 students. And then again, through the middle school level it tended to be higher, like 75, because you're looking at students who may have interrupted formal education, and there's just a larger gap and need for growth that is really difficult for some students that are coming with varied backgrounds. So that's on top of all the other legal paperwork, but it's like 70 meetings that they're gonna have to.
Right, exactly. So, obviously, team chairperson is able to, chair in that special education, realm. You foresee needing, in a sense, a team chair for the English language learning population that's going to, as this act is brought forth, again, from the state level down to the school level, it's going to increase that need. Like you said, it's paperwork that's going to follow. It's going to establish goals, and those goals are going to have to be tracked by the team and reported on in a yearly basis, much like an IEP is
Yes.
developed, tracked, and reported on.
Yes.
Okay.
And just how that person's gonna need to coordinate, because we do have English learners with disabilities. And so if there is a student who is on an IEP, but also then doesn't make student growth percentage, they have to have a student success plan for their English language development, but they also have to have their IEP. And how do we collaborate across both departments to make sure that their IEP and their language development plan are in alignment and working toward the same goals, and that within the IEP they have the accommodations they need on their state assessment for access, because access is has very different testing than what MCAS would be. So it's really tailored. It really needs to be tailored for like all of their language domains, because there's in access they have a speaking piece and they have a listening piece as a part of MCAS. That's all reading and writing. So there's going to be a need to collaborate, and they'll very much mimic each other.
Yeah. Point, did you feel like, that'll be something we're going to put forth till the next budget?
Yeah,
Looking
it's
at
one
those
of
positions.
Absolutely, it's one of
Yeah.
the things we're talking about from just like, and Jen just did a presentation to
Right.
like the central office group,
Yeah.
which she's part of as well, just recently, and that's part of the
Right, certainly, yeah, I mean, it's a special education team chair
equivalent almost.
equivalent, exactly, thank you.
I honestly don't see it. At this point, I can't see there needing to be a team, like an EL coordinator at both K2 schools, because
Right.
like I said, that major paperwork is starting at grade 2.
Mhm.
Woodland is like crazy because you have all the former English learner monitoring that you have to do, and that's paper and observations, and then the meetings, and then, so it's a lot. So I don't think that we would need to I think that the EL coordinator could stay between pre-K, K2.
Yep.
But we definitely need somebody at the 3-5 level, and I would say eventually splitting the 6 to 12 to separate. But that's like phase-in process.
And this is a job that doesn't exist right now, right? So this is gonna be someone that has, in a sense, team chair background, but needs to be able to bring that, that organization skill set over to the EL population.
Yeah, they would have to have EL licensure.
Right.
Yeah.
How's that student growth calculated? So is the EL student, the SLIFE student, and the EL student with a disability all held to the same standard?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that presents a lot of challenges.
Yes.
Can you explain that one more time?
So Joe's question
Yeah.
was, are English learners with disabilities and students with limited or interrupted formal education held to the same standards as students who are in the general education setting, who are simply attaining English language, like attaining their English language for reclassification. So the target is still the same. So all students need to meet this expectation, just like MCAS, like they all have the same expectation, and to be reclassified.
So that's another example where the data could be misleading, because we could, our percentage of students could be low, meeting the student growth percentile, but it's because of some of the underlying.
It's a conversation that Lucy Jenkins and I have already had. The students that are past the 6-year attainment, who are at Stacy Middle School right now, are 90 some percent. It was like 90 some percent of the students who are still in the English Learner Program because they haven't met reclassification criteria are also students with disabilities. And so how do we, now that we know this data, now that this data is being provided to us, which it wasn't before, and we're able to see this, then that's when we can have real quality conversations on saying, wow, okay, this is what we noticed. Well, what are our next steps, and how do we meet the needs of our English learners with disabilities? Because if they're not making progress on language acquisition, how are they doing on their IEP goals? And so we can start having, pulling IEPs and saying, oh, well, here's how they're progressing, or here's how they're not. Is that aligned to English development? So those conversations haven't happened yet because we haven't been provided this data that allows for those conversations, but it's definitely on our radar and within our thinking moving forward.
Do the FEL students ever go back? Like, do you ever test backward into the program?
That's the whole purpose of the monitoring.
Okay.
So we just pushed out to the Elevation program full force for monitoring. So right now, you saw we had 343 students that are FELs, and every core academic teacher is required to fill out a form about them. So that it has to go out for each student, it has to go out to their math teacher, their social studies, their science, their ELA, their reading. So that times 5, and up until this year, we were doing it paper, pen and paper, and running around trying to collect 1,500 papers. So we finally have a technology system in place because we've been working with X2. And X2's data has all been cleaned up, and we've been able to create an export, and so we just piloted it out, and it's been all pushed out, and so that's been exceptional. So we've been able to minimize a lot through some technology pieces now, like software programs.
And then is the access testing annual?
Annually.
So that's what the SGP is, an annual target.
It starts January 3rd through February 12th, so kids come back from break and it's access time.
Right. And is one of the sort of means of dealing with targets that didn't hit, if you didn't hit your target, is it specific interventions in terms of would we need additional intervention people to be doing?
No, not necessarily, because we would look at that student, where did that student not make growth, where did that student make growth? So because for access, it might say the student made growth in their listening and their speaking, maybe not in reading, and then did in writing, I don't know. And we can look at around reading, is that student already having access to reading intervention? So I don't think it's necessarily more stuff, it's just more tailored on what we need to work with that student. So we usually see that our students in different demographics struggle in different areas. And so speaking in our district is an area where we score lower than any other domain. So we need to start, as Craig was talking earlier, around our coaches, are we providing more discourse? So oral language is the first way of acquiring a language. For even us, as we were little kids, you learn to speak and listen first before that can go into your reading and your writing. So are we having as our English learner numbers increase, are we having enough dialogue in our classroom for our students to be attaining language, so that then does go into their literacy skills? So these are conversations we have to have at a bigger level.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Thank you very much, Jen.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, next on the agenda is the policy reading for organization of instruction, Megan, do you wanna touch on this?
Sure, Joe. So hopefully this is an easy one to move forward. It was
Yep.
just basically realigning the policy to move the 5th grade back to the elementary level.
And which it
That was
clearly
the fundamental
states here.
change,
We had our first reading on our last meeting, so this is our second reading, and can I get a motion to accept this policy? Motion by Joe, seconded by Jim. All in favor? Laura, she's next on the agenda is report of superintendent of schools. Strategic plan. Kevin, before we get into this real quick, I know there's been some confusion within the community. Just on the naming of these plans, I know we have facilities plan that ties into educational strategic plan, and then you have this plan that we're gonna be working on. It seems like everyone's asking, how many plans are out there? And if there is a way to simplify facilities, education, like just bring it down to 2 if it's possible.
Yeah, so this would be kind of like what would be considered the education plan. I think the trick is everything is interconnected. Like even as you saw, Jen and Craig's presentations tonight, there's a lot of levels of plans and implementation that we do. But I think just as a simple way to answer the question is, I think the strategic plan is more or less like the education plan. This is how we're approaching general district improvement, like on a day-to-day level and a year-to-year level. And the education facilities plan, although it's tied to our facilities have to kind of mirror what our educational goals are. So there's that connection, but that's more of a facilities plan and more of a longer-term plan in terms of does the space meet the needs of what we're trying to do educationally.
Yeah, I think that was some of the confusion. You have your education facilities plan and then your education strategic plan. I think that was where some of the confusion was lied. So I don't know if we can one's just basically facilities plan and the other one's just the educational plan. Now, I know they tie in together. I just feel it's gonna just confuse a lot of people.
Yeah.
I'm confused talking about it. And I don't know if anybody else feels the same way about it. I don't know if you guys have had any conversations
certainly,
about
yeah.
it as
I mean,
well. I know it's a simple, I don't wanna say clerical or anything like that, but it just brings it down to 2 things, and that's what people get the
I think what we could probably rename this, and again, I think in education it's jargon-filled and nothing simple, is we could probably call this the education strategic plan, and I think that probably clarifies.
I think that would work.
Why don't we do that?
Is everyone coaching?
Sure. There's no state mandate on how these need to be called.
These are
I know.
district level.
District level, no,
Nope.
certainly,
So we
and
call
I,
them. And maybe that'll clarify
People
some of
concerned
the
about it, so I mean, I wanna.
Right.
confusion out
Get it out
there.
there.
in that same conversation, the long-range education plan, I think, though, does that need to stay?
That's the long-range education facilities plan.
It is facilities.
And that's part of
plan,
like the
okay.
MSBA process that we
Right,
do.
exactly. So that
So that we
needs to
can't change the
stay.
name on.
That's-
We're
that's
stuck-
why,
We're
yep.
stuck with that one.
Yep.
So continue with your 3,000 slides.
I think it's only like 60, so you guys are in for a treat. All right, as Craig is pulling this up, we've talked about this a great deal, but the Milford, the strategic education strategic plan is really broken into 4 strategic focus areas. And the first one is social emotional learning. Equity and access is the second one, growth-focused instruction, and continuous learning. And they're all critically important. And I want to kind of walk you through kind of how we're measuring each of these things. And I'm kind of waiting for Craig to get the clicker so people can follow along at home. Because I'll buzz through. Do you want to click it for me if it's not working? So I'm gonna keep pressing through then, just in the interest of time. The goals of this presentation is really 3. The first one is we want to review progress towards goals in 17-18 and just give you a sense of that. I'm not going to spend a tremendous amount of time on it, but I'm giving you kind of some of the information that we have. Second, I want to update the committee on key areas of the 2018-19 version of the plan and then answer any questions. For 17-18, we had 55 different indicators. And for growth-focused instruction, we had 12. For social emotional learning, we had 8. For equity and access, we had 7. And continuous learning, we had 28. There we go. We getting it? All right, perfect. So what am I pressing?
There's your arrows.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So some of the key data points, and I've shared these with the committee and publicly a few times, but I'm going to highlight just a couple of them. One thing we're particularly proud of is that someone attending the Milford Public Schools can really go anywhere educationally. And we have students that go to the most competitive colleges and universities in the country. And just in the last few years, we've had Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Boston College, Bates, Holy Cross, BU, Northeastern. We had a Stonehill College person a little earlier today. It really, and the point of me sharing like where some of the top schools are is really to send the message that a student entering the Milford Public Schools in kindergarten has the opportunity to go to any college, university in the country or even in the world. The second thing is we focus a lot on MCAS, and I'm not going to talk a lot about MCAS tonight, but it's important for people to know that we have a wealth of programs and opportunities. And at the high school alone, there's 19 AP courses, there's early college courses. Josh earlier today, Josh Legore talked about the Hospitality and Tourism Management program. We have a Buildings Trades program, a Business and Banking program that all supports students' preparation for college and careers. Beyond that, we have a tremendous extracurricular and athletic life for students. And at the middle and high school level, there's more than 100 clubs and activities that students can participate in. So I'm gonna switch gears a little bit, and these are the areas we're gonna focus on tonight. Teacher quality, mathematics achievement and growth, early college, Project Lead the Way, common assessments, writing with colors, social emotional learning, social worker statistics, English learner program, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because Jen just gave you, I think, a much more thorough explanation of what's going on, the pre-referral process for special education, attendance, access to rigorous coursework, family and community outreach and engagement, professional development, embedded professional development, and graduate coursework. So this is actually a picture of our new teachers on the bus the first day they're reported to school. Craig Consigli, Andy Anderson, and Eric Rodriguez gave them a tour of the Milford community as kind of an introduction to their experience in Milford. The growth-focused instruction has 4 key areas. And these are things we emphasize across the board. Classroom settings are learner-centered and focus on growth for all students. We're looking to increase engagement, expectations, and outcomes for all students. We want the curriculum to be rigorous and relevant. We really want to focus on mathematics growth and achievement, and we want to ensure that the Milford Public Schools recruits, selects, and supports the highest quality educators. And these are some of the key areas. I'm not going to read each one of these because I'm going to hit on some key areas. So state accountability, again, Craig spent a lot of time earlier in the year. We spent 3 or 4 meetings talking about, MCAS scores and growth, but I just want to emphasize to the Milford community that our overall classification, which is where most districts in the state lie, and where Milford is in as well, is not requiring assistance or intervention. Woodland Elementary School met all targets. Milford High School has increased its accountability status by more than 70% in the last 2 years. Our growth in most areas is pretty strong. For ELA, it's over 50. For grades 3 through 8, for the high school, it's 57 this past year. For math, it's in 3 through 8, it's 47.7, and for the high school, math is lower than we want at 37.8. Good growth is anywhere from 40 to 59. Over 50 is very good. So, teacher quality, and I want to start with this because this is really what it's all about. If we have high quality teachers who are providing engaging, rigorous instruction in the classroom, we're gonna see success. So one of the things we're really focused on is recruiting, selecting, hiring, and supporting new teachers, ongoing and embedded professional development, and the supervision and evaluation process. And one of the focus of our leadership team meetings is that supervision and evaluation process, and we're doing a lot of activities and engagement around this to make sure we're providing actionable feedback to teachers. We're also, in each meeting I have with principals, I meet with each principal each month, as well as the preschool director, and we're talking about the evaluation process and supervision. We're also doing monthly walkthroughs where we're targeting specific things, and there are different things at different schools based on the priorities of each principal. So what does it mean in terms of recruiting, selecting, and supporting the teachers? We want to create a consistent and more rigorous interview and selection process, and we update that every year. Each candidate meets with me after the recommendation of the building principal or director. There's significant involvement by teachers in the process, and this even starts with recruitment. We bring alumni who are teachers to recruitment events because they're able to share, as a former Boston College student or Leslie student, what it's like to work in the Milford Public Schools and why there's such why there's such benefits and why it's such a positive place to teach and have your career. And again, this is an iterative process that is updated and improved each year. This is critically important because enrollment in both undergraduate and graduate programs of teacher education are declining. And the teaching force nationally is aging, and districts and states will be competing for a smaller and smaller talent pool as years go on. And we were in kind of a crisis situation in the late 80s, early 90s, and I think we're heading back there. And so we're going to have to become even more aggressive as a district in terms of where we're going with teacher recruitment. And one of the things in the picture there, Craig, Jen, and I were visiting LaSalle College, where we developed a partnership with them, ideally to start growing some of our own teachers. And so right now in the spring, we've got, I think it's like 10 students at the high school who are enrolled in a 1-credit early college teacher education, kind of pre-teacher education program. And they actually give full scholarships to several students across the state who participate in this program. So it's a fantastic opportunity for the students to get a taste of college life because they're able to go on campus. It's also a wonderful opportunity for the Milford Public Schools because we're starting to build our own talent. So mathematics achievement and growth, and Craig has spent a lot of time talking about this, so I don't want to belabor it. I'm going to share a few data points and a few things that we're doing, but the goal is really to close gaps by 50% and increase growth into that 40 to 59 ratio, and ideally above 50. And we've done a few things to try to improve mathematical performance and engagement across the district. And one of those things is the implementation of ST Math at Woodland Elementary School, which started last year, and we're in our full implementation this year. We have a full course rollout to close mathematics learning gaps at Milford High School this year. We've done 2 years of pilots previously. And we're also in the process of piloting interim assessments through iReady at Woodland, Brookside, and Memorial in 2018-19. Woodland is already in the implementation phase. Brookside and Memorial, we're anticipating will be implementing it shortly this year in the spring. So the mathematics area is an area where across the district we really didn't close the gaps this year, and we're still trying to figure out why that's happening. And again, we've talked about this kind of extensively. At the 3 through 8 level, we really saw overall no change in performance, but at the high school level, we saw a slight decline. And we're looking to kind of turn that around. And I'm going to show you some data that I think is encouraging, and I think participation in that class at the high school level is going to provide a lot of support for a lot of our students who are struggling. This slide this is one of the reports. And again, I've got to cut off some of it because some of the teacher names are connected to it, so it's going to be, it's a little clunky. But basically, this is where the teachers are in terms of engagement with the ST Math program. And you can see a lot of classes are right at the line where they're supposed to be or a little above it in terms of time. In this next slide, which is hard to see at home, but basically the goal for ST Math is to use the program for 60 minutes a week. And we have a pilot going on in 2nd grade. Is that at Memorial or Brookside, Craig? Do you know?
ST Math?
Yeah. I can't remember off the top of my head, but either Memorial or Brookside, one of the classes is piloting it, and they're getting about 39 minutes a week. If you look across the board, the average is 65 minutes. It's probably even a little bit higher than that because the the second grade pilot is probably dropping it a little bit, but not much. So it's a pretty accurate assessment of where.
It's Brookside.
Is it Brookside?
Yeah.
Okay. Of where, of how much they're using it, and we really believe because it's really developing problem-solving skills for the students, and it's done in a nonverbal, visual way, so they're really able to kind of spatially understand mathematical concepts. This next slide, and Josh has shared this slide before, but I thought it was important. Josh Outland, the high school principal. I thought it was important to throw it out there again. If you look at the top bar is basically students who took the pilot intervention course in 10th grade, and the bottom, and these are students who are at risk for potentially not passing the MCAS in 10th grade. They were students who in 8th grade scored either needs improvement or were in the warning category. And you can see that there's a significant improvement from the students who took so there's a higher level of green basically visually for the students who took the intervention course versus the students that did not take the intervention course. And we anticipate that that's going to have a broader impact on scores overall as well as growth on this year's MCAS, like the spring MCAS administration, because it's fully implemented this year for the first time. So these are some of the things we believe and we're going to continue to do. And I think the math piece is going to be something that we're going to be focused on for the next several years, because we're going to see, I think, shifts in improvement. It's going to be gradual. I don't think it's going to be dramatic. I don't think that's realistic. But we believe these recent shifts, including the interim assessment implementation, new courses offered at Milford High School, and implementation of ST Math will support math growth and achievement. We're continuing to look at time on learning for mathematics at all levels, and we are continuing to ensure that course and grade level alignment with state standards is occurring across the district. And again, we're continuing to look at mathematical classroom practices to support student interest and engagement. This year for early college, we're offering 3 courses through Framingham State University and Mass Bay. One we offered in the fall, we're going to be offering 2 in the spring, and then we're offering that course I just talked about through LaSalle College, focused on students interested in entering the teaching profession. Project Lead the Way, and again, we've talked about this a little bit across the year, but we've implemented 2 courses at Milford High School in the school year, Principles of Biomedical Science and Computer Science Essentials. This is the first in a phase of course pathways that we hope to incorporate. The sketch outline is one of the actual Tim Walsh teaches this class at the high school, and they actually do like a forensic kind of lab where they try to figure out what happened to the person who got murdered. And so each of the little dots on there is kind of like some evidence that they have to kind of consider. And it's actually a fantastic, engaging hands-on lab. And I missed it this year because I wasn't in the district the day, but he promised me he'd give me a heads up next year when they did it because it looks awesome. And the kids had great things to say about it who participated. We also had a grant-funded visit to the Nashville Public Schools to look at Project Lead the Way implementation in the academy model. We're writing grants to expand the program offerings across the district, and Project Lead the Way program is also available both at Woodland and Stacy through the STEM classes. Common assessments. We've been talking about common assessments for the last several years. We have MCIEA performance assessments that we're in the process of recruiting for right now. I might have Craig talk about that a little bit when we get to that slide. Interim assessments at the K-5 level, and we're piloting that again through iReady. Writing with Colors at Milford High School, and Stacy grade level departmental teams are creating common assessments that they're hoping to roll out the second half of the year. Do you want to talk about the MCIEA
Sure.
pilot?
So we're actually gaining a little bit of traction with MCIA at the state level, and they're starting to listen to us a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish with an accountability system, a different accountability system. So the next step in the process for us is to actually do a pilot. And we've identified 3 different areas: 4th grade math, 7th grade science, and 10th grade ELA. Each of the participating members of the consortium, the 7 different districts, were asked to get 1 person from each of their from each of those grade levels. It didn't exactly go the way that they wanted, so they opened it up to whoever wanted to get more, and I offered up 3 of each, and teachers took to it. So we were able to get the entire 7th grade science team and 3 of the 4th grade math teachers to participate in this. Grade 10 we left alone. We left alone because of writing with colors. We didn't want to add this to the mix and kind of muddy the waters with what they were already doing. We felt like what they were doing was already making a difference, and we just didn't want to mess with it. So they met for the 4th grade teachers and the 7th grade teachers met for the first time last week with all the other districts. What they did was they selected a cross-district performance assessment. So they had a bank of assessments that they chose from, and now what they're doing is they're back in district and they're looking at the assessment and they're making little tweaks to it, and then they're going to build like a UBD unit based on this performance assessment, and they're going to administer it to all their students. They're going to grade it, and then they're going to come back to the consortium and do a double-blind study to make sure that all the different teachers graded it in the same way. And then over the summer they're going to look at the results and see how they did.
So what we love about MCIA is a lot of things. There's collaboration involved, but like Craig was talking about, inter-rater reliability, which we're really looking for in any assessment that we do, as well as validity and reliability. And we've got a team from MCIA that does a lot of that heavy lifting for us, because we don't necessarily have the expertise at all grade levels across the district, and we just don't have a team of psychometricians kind of running around the Milford Public Schools. Neither does really anybody else. Tim Kiernan and his team talked about this at the previous meeting, but there's been we've seen a lot of positive momentum with the interim assessments, and the teachers, I think, are really, we're getting a lot of positive feedback. This is an example of a report. I just want to throw it up there. We're not at the point where we want to share the data publicly, because we're using it formatively and we're still kind of figuring it out. But I think in a couple of years there'll be a good opportunity to share this as a data point where we're really looking at progress that's different from the MCAS that we're going to be monitoring 3 times at least across the year. Writing with colors implementation. And I want to give a ton of credit to Eamon Cunningham and the high school English team. The work they've done is really, really incredible, and I think it's going to be kind of a model of how assessment work should be done across the state or across the country. We're in our 3rd year of implementation. It supports the writing development and responding to MCAS writing prompts. This year we're piloting a new process for the first administration of the next generation MCAS in the spring of 2019. So the high school was using the legacy MCAS, so this is kind of their first foray into the new version of the test. And they've got, I think, a good plan of attack and a good game plan. So it's English teachers, special education teachers, and EL teachers participating in common writing assessments. And Eamon is carrying a huge amount of the assessment load to make sure that there's that kind of consistency in terms of, everything, there's consistency in the assessment. If you look, and it's kind of hard to see, or it's hard for me to see because I should be wearing glasses right now probably, is our advanced numbers in MCAS shot up from like mid-40s to 62. And that's a huge improvement. In 2017, we saw only 1 student actually did not pass the MCAS in the entire 10th grade. And we had a little bit of a higher percentage in 2018, but we saw a huge jump in the percentage of advanced. So we feel like the practice of using writing with colors is really taking hold and really having a very positive impact just on MCAS scores alone. I think even more so, if you look at the growth numbers, in 2016, our district growth number was 36, and it's jumped up to 57, and it was 52, I think, the year before. 52.5 the year before, so we're seeing consistently very strong growth as well. But again, I think when we put an overemphasis on MCAS performance, what it's really doing is preparing kids to basically pull evidence from text and make an argument or support an idea, and that's what they're going to have to do in college is academic writing. And regardless of the discipline, they're majoring at the college level. So I think there's tremendous there's tremendous value to it. And I think it's going to build good lifelong writing skills. And I think our Milford High School students will be ahead of the game compared to a lot of their peers entering college. So some of the MHS indicators, and I want to share this, and this is something that Josh Otland shared with me. We're seeing really high participation in AP programming. 41% of 11th graders are taking one or more AP courses. 50% of 12th graders are taking one or more AP courses. Again, there's broad offerings of rigorous courses between, we offer 15 and 19 AP courses a year, plus several early college courses. So there's a real opportunity to engage in, a high level of rigor and to earn college credits or exemptions when students enter college. So there's a real value there. So these are the indicators. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this piece, but I'm happy to answer any questions when I wrap up. But I really kind of broke it down into we either met the target, it's partially complete, it's ongoing, or we reviewed it. I think are the areas that I kind of, we labeled each of these things. And sometimes even if we met a target, we may have a similar target the following year. With recruiting, we're still going to try to hit those marks in terms of hitting, recruitment fairs, making adjustments to the interview process, et cetera. We're always looking to expand our early college, high school program. And again, like I said, with math achievement and growth, this is going to be an ongoing process. We're going to be looking at it because we didn't meet the mark this year, and we're really looking critically at how do we get kind of a better handle on moving the needle. I feel like we've got the formula for the ELA MCAS. We haven't figured out the formula yet for math to make sure that students are kind of hitting those targets. The second piece I want to talk about is social emotional learning, and we're really trying to do three things there. It's developing social and emotional competency in faculty and staff, increase communication with families in the community, and build social emotional skills and competencies in students. And these are a list of some of the trainings, and I give Lisa Kincaid a lot of credit, because if you look at this, it seems like the program has been in place for a decade, and she's always expanding and bringing new resources. We brought the NAN project, which talks about suicide and depression to the high school faculty, in the middle school as well. Is going to see that I think in the spring. We're looking to do trauma training across the district. We have a lot of students who have had trauma in their lives, and how do you kind of work with those students, and how are you sensitive to their needs, not only from an educational perspective, but also just from a classroom culture or school culture perspective. And then she's doing a lot of outreach and meetings to make sure that a lot of this program is moving forward. We're incorporating SEL into the mentor piece, and she's working closely with Craig Consigli, reluctantly. There's also a great deal of SEL work with students. We had a Starts with Hello program across the district. This is one of the displays at Woodland Elementary School. We continued a partnership with the Community Impact Group for counseling of students. There's a new partnership with Wayside that started October 1st, where we're bringing a bilingual counselor starting at 1 time per week at Milford High School. Trauma services are offered to students from K to 12 with parent permission. And currently 3 counselors as of November 1st are working at the high school. So we're bulking up through, and this is all free. These are all free services that Lisa has been able to pull into the district, and it's been a tremendous help and support for a lot of our students. We're also rolling out the Second Step program at Woodland Elementary School. Teachers from 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade are piloting the program this year. Again, Starts with Hello Week. Seeds of Happiness, we did a program at Stacy, very similar to the program we ran at Milford High School last year. And they also created a bullying presentation in Portuguese and Spanish for EL students with the Woodland staff. And again, just being culturally responsive, which is a critical component of all of this. The elementary social worker, who's Anita Monte, who's been doing a phenomenal job, and she hit the ground running at the beginning of the school year. We're serving students and families, and this is basically pre-K through 5, but Brookside Memorial in Woodland. And year to date, as she's working with 50 families, she's made 49 referrals for services and supports, 23 students are now receiving school-based therapy from an outside agency. Other students are connected to outpatient or home-based supports. And she's doing weekly work with the Department of Children and Families related to the Milford families we serve in the schools. And she's filling like a critical need where she's really engaging these families to social services. And Anita was such a find because she worked for the Department of Mental Health. And so she's got this tremendous network of contacts throughout the state and is aware of programming that we just didn't have access to as a public school system. So she's just been a phenomenal resource. And I just wanted to kind of give you a sense of the impact she's making so far just in a few short months. And these are some of the targets from 2017-18 and kind of where we're at. And again, some of these things are things that we've decided we're not indicators we're gonna pursue for a variety of reasons. The next piece is equity and access. And I want to read this because I think it's critically important, and it really speaks to some of the core values of the Milford Public Schools. Equity in education is a measure of achievement, fairness, and opportunity. In order to make education accessible, all students need to have equal and equitable educational opportunities regardless of their age, race, social class, gender, religion, heritage, language, ethnic background, or physical and mental disabilities. So we're doing a few things that are kind of key areas. We're focusing on inclusion. We're trying to close the gap in achievement and growth for all students, and we're trying to increase access to the most rigorous courses for all students. So I think Jen kind of hit the English learner programming, so I'm not going to talk about that at all. But the pre-referral process, we have a district accommodation plan that I believe is a model for the state. And this was a lot of work by Jen Norjanian, Emily Laurie, Rachel Driscoll, and a number of other faculty members over the last several years to really focus on making sure that we're doing everything we can before a student heads into the special education process. And each year we're reviewing the DCAP across the district with ways to kind of tighten up the process. Attendance strategies, and I know we've talked about this a little bit from not only an accountability standpoint, but also a school improvement plan standpoint, and a number of our principals have incorporated, attendance goals into their school improvement plans. But we're really looking to increase communication, which includes individual letters home to families, attendance updates in school newsletters, and on social media. We're really trying to send a message, both on an individual level and a collective level, that it's really important to attend school. And I'm going to show you a couple data points that are kind of eye-opening. And I think if parents saw them, they may decide to have a different conversation if their child says, I just don't feel like going to school today, because it's critically important to be there. Direct follow-up with families where a child has an attendance issue, conducting home visits to meet with parents and/or students to determine needs, holding multiple meetings to offer resources and supports to increase attendance, data analysis using local attendance data and state-level at-risk data. Our administrators are reading a school leader's guide to tackling attendance challenges, filing CRAs, which used to be CHINs. It's the new CHINs term. If you're following the local juvenile courts, it means a child requiring assistance, offering modified school days and transition back to full days, providing in-home services as needed. If you look at the Woodland data, and across the board, you're basically seeing exceeding the target or met the target. There's a couple where it fell below the target, but just putting an emphasis on that made a real difference at the Woodland Elementary School. And I think it also impacted, because students were attending school, they're doing better academically, and they're more engaged. This is just a copy of their SIP goal from last year. And again, they're getting accountability, points per se. That's not really our goal. Our goal is to have students kind of attending and engaged in school. But it's benefiting us also from an accountability perspective. The next two slides are slides from that Josh Otland provided. And I can't remember if he shared them here or in another setting. But the first one is, and this is critically important. If you look at, it's basically GPAs of students. So students in the red are it's two different tables. The first table is attendance, the second table is tardiness. And the students in red have a very high level of either they're not attending school or they're regularly tardy. and their GPAs are significantly lower than students that have lower number of days out or fewer tardies. So if you show up on time and you're here every day, the likelihood of you doing better academically goes up pretty dramatically. And if you're not showing up consistently, it really is impacting your performance, and there really is a connection there. The second piece is the access to rigorous coursework. And this is just the number of students participating in AP tests and the scores in those AP tests. So not only are we having, over the last basically 10 years, a higher level of participation, we're also seeing a higher level of performance. So the performance is going up as the participation is increasing. And all the research points to students do better in college if they're taking rigorous courses. You're better off struggling a little bit in a rigorous course than taking kind of an easier path and kind of excelling. So we're really pushing kids not only to take AP courses, and we're seeing, I think, a little dip because we're seeing early college enter the scene a little bit as well. And so that's going to impact the AP numbers, and we're trying to figure out a way to kind of represent both. We haven't done that yet, but I'm sure we will in the not too distant future. The other piece is one of the accountability points for high school is access to advanced coursework for students categories as high needs. And we received full credit from that from the Department of Education because our high needs students are accessing these rigorous courses. It's not just kind of the ivory tower, top 2 or 3% at the high school. We're really trying to open it to as many students as possible. And 50% of the senior class last year took at least one AP course. So that's a pretty high percentage. Oops. I'm looking at it on my page, I'm not showing it to you up there. Family and community outreach, and Jen talked about Anna Cahill. She's the person to the right of Jen holding the sign. She's the family resource manager, and she started this fall in a new role. In the spring, we're really looking to up our engagement factor with the community through that office. The first half of the year, there's a lot of new families coming through, and it gets tough. The second half of the year, the focus is really going to be on engagement. We have a Family Bridges program that makes connections. There's native language orientation programs at Milford High School, which we put in place for the first time this year for freshman orientation. The development and growth of MPAC for parents of students with special needs. College visits for first-generation college students. And Craig is working very closely with Vinnie Kizo and help me out,
Christina Cody.
Christina Cody, thank you. Hopefully she's not watching. On Hawk University program that's just engaging families in a variety of areas that we've heard that there's some needs or some interest in more information. These are some of the indicators from 17-18 in terms of where we're going. You'll see a couple ongoing and a number of them are met. Because they were met doesn't mean we're going to not continue looking at them this year and the year after. Like differentiating and personalizing instruction, we had a few very specific things we were looking at there. We are expanding that or adjusting it for this coming year and next year. Continuous learning. And our goal here is, again, further develop a culture and supports required to instill a spirit of constant and continuous learning for all members of the Milford Public Schools community. And that includes ongoing and embedded professional development. You saw that with the coaching tonight. Create and support opportunities for collaboration, provide opportunities for the community and the schools to collaborate and learn together. And those are some of the forums and Hawk University programming that we're doing, as well as we have a ton of offerings at each of the schools for families and students to engage in that kind of runs the gambit. For faculty and staff, professional development falls into 4 key areas. There's professional development programming, which is kind of your traditional school professional development, which falls under like professional days that we have, contractual Tuesdays, kind of the one-off professional development that Craig was talking about earlier. What I love and I think has the most promise is the embedded professional development. And that's the instructional coaches, technology integration teachers, EL coordinators, PLCs that we have, professional learning communities, leadership team meetings, and curriculum team meetings. And these are ongoing programming that I think has the most most positive benefit for teachers. We also have programs or college courses. So we have the FSU EL Master's program that Jen talked about, where we have 22 of our teachers enrolled in it, and relicensure, general master's or doctoral programs that a number of our faculty members are participating on a regular basis. And we also send our faculty and administrators to a number of conferences and symposia. So this gives you a sense too of faculty enrollment in graduate courses by year. In 2016, we had 154, 2017, 173, 2018, 175. We have, I think, a faculty that's getting younger on average. So I think we're going to probably see our course enrollment go up a little bit. And Kathy's seen those trends as well. And I want to thank Kathy for pulling this together for me. Some of our professional development offerings for this year, and I'm not going to list them all because they're pretty significant. And it's a combination of what our coaches are providing, what our instructional technology teachers are providing, as well as Dr. Joseph and his team, and then just some of the different groups we've had come in, like ST Math came in to give some professional development. The iReady folks came in. There's the SEL programming that we offer. Scaffolding learning through language, which is a WIDA workshop. What is culturally responsive mathematics teaching? Facilitating language development with students on IEPs. Professional development around writing with colors, which is ongoing, which is led by Eamon Cunningham and a consultant that we brought in to bring the Writing with Colors program in. And then just basic stuff like access for ELL administration and recertification. And then we had a keynote speaker at the beginning of the year, no such thing as a bad kid, understanding and recognizing kids with emotional and behavioral challenges. So it's pretty broad. Instructional coaching, I think we've covered that. The FSU Master's Program, Jen spoke about earlier. And this one, and we've got to maybe figure out a different way to look at progress, but we set some key areas where we wanted to see some professional development happen, and we kind of made it happen. And I think we're going to try to categorize that differently for 18, 19, and 19, 20. And I'm not quite sure what that's going to look like when I present it to you next year. So I want to open it up for questions.
Anybody got any questions for Kevin? Or we sit through this?
Joe?
Chris, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, no problem, we go through my notes, so I'll get. I guess, one of the first ones was, you had the performance assessment pilot tool. How does that compare to the iReady tool? It seems like they're very different. Are they gonna be two separate tools that we, again, along with
So,
other assessments, so?
So what we're doing with MCIEA is looking at performance assessments as a way to determine proficiency instead of MCAS. Okay, so teachers would use basically 3 or 4 performance assessments throughout the year to be able to provide evidence to the state that any student of ours is making academic gains. Right? So the best part I think about this program is that it starts at November or so is the first one, and you're able to adjust practice as you go. So it's really truly informing your instruction versus MCAS, where the kid takes the test on one day and you don't get the results until June, and then how do you adjust practice because you have a whole different group of kids and you don't technically know what the kids are going to be assessed on at the end of the year anyways, other than all the standards.
So would this tool is this a district-wide, all grade level type, or is it specific to a grade level?
Well, like I said, right now we're in the pilot of it. I think there's still going to be dipstick years where MCAS will be what the kids are doing, but I think eventually it might actually end up in the K2s also, so it may be a K-12 thing, because the state right now is trying to figure out a way to provide an accountability rating for the K2 schools, because there's only 85 or so in the state, and we happen to have 2 of them.
Okay.
So that's another way that MCIA is looking to get in and saying, hey, we can create the system with teachers with performance assessments, and we can use that in K2 schools. So, but it is different.
Yeah, again, it's another tool that we're hoping to implement,
Yep.
beyond, I know it was always previously focused on MCAS, so now we've got iReady, we've got this performance assessment tool, so again, it's just another checks and balance of the learning process.
And the performance assessment actually fits very nicely with our understanding by design, or UBD, right? Because you have the performance assessment, then you work backwards to getting the kids to where they need to be able to perform well in this performance assessment.
And it's driving engaging and rigorous curriculum is really the goal, because there's an end point that you're working towards.
Okay. Can you go back on this slide? It was my page 40, I'm sorry. It was the MCAS achievement level.
Is it the Writing with Colors one?
It was just beyond, we looked at the MCAS, the annual comparisons of grade 10.
Okay.
So right after the Writing with Colors implementation.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can you just explain a little bit more of this chart and what I'm looking at? I'm sorry if I missed it on the first go around. But
Yeah, so basically this is the last 4 years of data, and this is actually an apples to apples comparison, because the MCAS tests at the high school have remained legacy MCAS. When we have the test next year, it's not really going to be the same kind of comparison. So it's going to be a few years before we really get a sense of, like, I think of it, and I think there's going to be a little calibration happening, not only with us but across the state. So basically, and our scores have always been pretty good to very good at the high school level for ELA on the MCAS test. But what we're seeing is a couple of things with the Writing with Colors. One is if you look at like the percentages, they haven't changed dramatically. I'm going to pull it up on my PowerPoint here. Give me 1 second, so I can give you the right numbers. I just physically can't see them from here. All right, I got it. So if you look, like, we're slightly below the state in terms of advanced in 15, 16, and in 17 we're kind of right there. But overall, like, our proficient in advanced is right about where the state is, within a percentage point. Like, we're a little, like, so like in 15 we were 47, the state was 49. In 16 it was 45, we were 45, the state was 47. 17, 47, 47. In 18 we made a big jump. We went to 62, the state went to 51. The state made a jump too, which doesn't happen very often, but we made a huge jump in terms of the advanced. The other thing is our CPI now, which is the top number, top row across, was a little, like in 15 it was a little above the state, in 16 a little below, in 17 it jumped like above, in 18 it jumped above again.
So, do we attribute this big jump to the implementation of the Writing with Color program?
100%.
Okay.
100%. So I think there's a real connection and correlation there,
Right.
because where we saw some of the biggest jumps in the scores is in the written responses.
Right.
Because the written responses were much more thorough. They were pulling evidence from the different passages, and I think the kids just had a better understanding of the expectations.
Which segues into, so obviously, we implemented a program for the Writing with Colors, saw a significant gain. I guess, is there a similar program from the math side? Is it this ST Math? It sounds like ST Math we're implementing it down at the elementary level, but when we look at the MCAS scores right now, there's an issue at the high school level.
Yep. So I would say for the high school, we've implemented the intervention course.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going to have a very positive impact on scores, because it did the last 2 years for our kids who took the pilot sections of it. And so we offered a section or two each of the last 2 years, and our kids who scored needs improvement or warning on the 8th grade MCAS did much better if they took the intervention course than if they didn't take the intervention course. So right now we have enough opportunity for any student who was at risk for the 10th grade MCAS to enroll. Parents always have the option of not having their kids enroll in that course, so not every student who is at risk is enrolling in the course, but I would say the vast majority are. And so I expect to see, I don't think it's going to be, this is kind of, I don't want to say it like a miracle jump, because it's not a miracle, because there's a lot of hard work that went behind it.
Right.
But usually you don't see such a dramatic like jump in growth and jump in like the percentage of kids who fall in the advanced section. So I don't want to give the committee like the false sense that like there's like this magical formula for everything. I think we'll see improvement, but I think it's going to be more incremental for the mathematics.
Can I add to that? I think really beyond just kids doing writing with colors. I think we're selling short the leadership that Eamon brought to this. I think Eamon is the key to this whole operation. He puts in a
I will second that enthusiastically.
Amount of work outside of hours to make sure that all the teachers are on board. He provides the professional development on his own time. I don't know. I just think Eamon's leadership just brings this to where it needs to be. I think bringing somebody in and just teaching teachers how to do writing with colors is one thing, but to have the support that Eamon provides, and Eamon's correcting all of the assessments himself, and he's providing the feedback to the teachers. I mean, I think that's really the key to the whole success.
And it's a great example of we really try to provide the opportunities for teachers to take on leadership roles. And Eamon came with this idea, I think, in Carrie Binox last year, and said, "Hey, we've seen this thing. It's got incredible results in other places." And we started, like we do with anything, we started out with a pilot and it grew. And it wasn't like a top-down thing. It was like a bottom-up, piece. And Eamon just took the reins and really led it. And he's got a lot of credibility with the English department. And I think Craig's absolutely right. It wasn't some expert coming in saying, "This is what you guys have to do." It was a respected colleague who said, "Hey, there's a lot of promise to this practice. I'm going to support you through it." And he's even created a testing platform, which I should have shown just a glimpse of it, so kids can actually experience what it's like to take the MCAS that he just created from scratch. It's unbelievable. So easy. I think there's so much work that went into this that was from a faculty member, and the rest of the English department jumped on. Josh and his team supported it. Carrie prior to that supported it. Craig and I have supported it, but it's not something that just we can kind of recreate. It's just not something we can necessarily recreate. We're trying to, because we always want to find that, if you can find that magic formula, and there's a lot of sweat equity that goes into the Writing with Colors program.
Sure.
But if we can find that piece, and I think some of the programs we're putting in place are going to support what's happening, and I think there's a lot of momentum with the interim assessments at the elementary level. I think the high school are looking at ways to kind of implement interim assessments. It's different though, because it's course based at the high school level, as opposed to everybody's taking 4th grade math. There's a number of different mathematics courses at the high school, so we're not going to just be able to give them one assessment or one series of assessments. But I know Cicely Tucker's working a lot with Mary Casello at the high school on really trying to get questions and programming that kind of measure the standards at the high school level, and make sure that the scope and sequence of a course is lining up with kind of the MCAS timelines. Because if we hit 2 standards after the test, maybe the kids know it by the end of the year, which is important, but it's not gonna be represented in the testing. Yeah. So does that answer your question?
It does, yes.
Okay.
It does, yeah.
So we're always looking for that kind of magic bullet.
Right, I
but
mean, it's a double-digit increase, it's great.
Yeah,
It just,
yeah.
but
But
it shows that by implementing a program, that showed a positive result. So,
Mhm.
obviously, we're looking for positive results with math. We have the math intervention, at least in the high school, and we have the ST math course at the lower level.
Yep.
So hopefully we'll see that, those
Yeah.
similar trend, at least we want improvement trends. If they're double digits, great.
Hey, fantastic.
Right, so-
I'm not gonna quibble
Right.
with that.
Yeah.
And the attendance thing at Woodland's
Yeah.
another great example of that.
Yeah.
They put a lot of effort and energy into attendance, and they saw a really good result. But again, sometimes you put effort
Yeah.
and focus on something, and it just doesn't move the needle.
Yeah.
And then you have to go back to the drawing board and figure something else out. And again, that's why we pilot things and then kind of expand them, because we don't want to go all in on something and have it not be effective.
Right.
Because it's not a good use of people's time or the community's resources.
So is this a presentation that you're going to be using at the forum?
I think
January?
we're going to probably incorporate a little more MCAS into it, because we beat MCAS to death with this group.
Yeah.
We're going to incorporate some more of the MCAS information that Craig shared with you guys earlier, and but it's going to be kind of follow a similar format.
There's a lot of great information in these slides. Is this something that's gonna be put out on?
Yeah, we'll put it up on the
website?
website as well.
Okay. And then on the key data point slide that you reviewed, I know you just touched on a couple of the items there, but that provided a nice summary of, you know, all the great things that are happening throughout the district.
Absolutely.
One of the bullets that you put in here is the value, right? So we're offering all these great programs, we're doing all these great things, and we're doing it while spending 10% less per student,
Yep.
right? And so that translates into about $1,463 per student, which
Correct.
is roughly $6 million a year,
Right.
less than the state average.
Correct.
And so that we need to continue to remain focused on that, because there's certainly room for improvement there, and if
The
want to
average, not
continue.
the top.
Exactly, yeah, the average. You know, we just want to get to a level playing field.
And Joe, if you don't mind me jumping in, one of the things that some of the highest performing districts in the state have are just the things Craig's talking about from a curriculum perspective. Because I consider Craig a scholar and a gentleman, but it's important to have people that are experts in content areas to provide that direct, that direct piece. I mean, I think anybody who is, educated can kind of see like why one program may work or why another might not. But if you're an expert in the field, you're gonna, and you've been a math teacher, you've been an English teacher, you're gonna have a real strong sense of, what's actually gonna sell to the teaching community too, and what's gonna be effective. And that goes back to the writing the colors thing. Eamon had instant credibility because he's one of the teachers at the high school. He's a curriculum team leader as well. But to have that expertise in particular content areas is what we see like a lot of the highest performing districts, not only in Massachusetts but across the country, provide that support because, again, and it's not it's no knock to Craig. I did the job that he's doing right now before, and it's very difficult to move from high school science to kindergarten, reading and pre-reading curriculum, and you have to do that kind of seamlessly. And to add that level of expertise to the district is only going to benefit us from like a teaching and learning perspective. And I think that's one of the things we would say we need that would close that spending gap that I think a lot of the districts that across the state have. And the other piece, if I could say one more thing.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I feel like I'm jumping on a soapbox now. But, Jen's presentation tonight, which, just happened because of our snow day, a couple meetings ago, you're seeing the EL population basically, or the families that speak a language other than English as the primary language in the home have basically doubled in the last 10 years. So not only are we spending less per student on average, our average Milford student is more expensive to educate because we have a little over 50% this year of our students who fall into that high needs category, where they're either, an English learner, and which requires, as Jen was saying, a lot of intensive education because you're trying to kind of close those gaps within 6 years, so the students can kind of engage engage the curriculum at a fluent level. Special education, students with special needs, and economically disadvantaged students. And again, that's why our plan is set up the way it is, because we have social emotional learning as a focus, equity and access as a focus, and growth focused instruction as a focus, which ties into that. But the average student in Milford, or 50% of our students, the state recognizes this, are more expensive to educate than your general education, typically American student, who's a native English speaker.
Yeah.
Thanks. Kevin, I think it's incredibly helpful to have kind of strategic focus areas that guide all of this as well as all the school improvement plans. And I know this was intended to be kind of an assessment or an update of where we are for last year's goals, right? So that was 17, 18. So
Yep.
now we're halfway through 18,
Yep.
19. Just from a procedural standpoint, do you kind of document all that and lock it down and then start to roll forward? And I would also think as part of that, you've looked at some of the 18, 19 goals and said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to
Yeah.
do this instead. How do we get involved in that? And then at what point do you bring kind of the future plan to us?
Yeah, so what we did as a kind of a leadership team is we looked through the 17-18 plan and looked at the 18-19 plan. And one great example is one of the targets we tried to set that I think we're going to move away from because we're just not getting valuable information from it, is we wanted to get a percentage, and we set targets of students, of classrooms where when we did a walkthrough, we saw student engagement. That led to a pretty rigorous and vigorous debate on the leadership team of what was engagement, what did it look like, how do you define it, how do you measure it? And we really, maybe we'll hit Kim Schmidt because I think she's got some good ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you, and how do you set targets? So I think we're going to have to reassess that one because we got kind of mixed data, and I didn't feel like there was validity and reliability with the way we were collecting the data or the way we were kind of capturing it. So I didn't want to really share it publicly
Sure.
because I just didn't really feel like it was good data. And so what we did as a team is we went through kind of all of the indicators last year. The 19 indicators shift a little bit, but there's a lot of similarities. And we talked about like where were there good measures, where were there not good measures, how could we come up with good measures, and those are some of the conversations we're still engaged in.
So will we see the current year targets before the current year is over? Not to be.
We could,
Okay.
you know, I just worry because like these conversations are important, but they're also time consuming. I think maybe in March I could probably share kind of maybe an update, but maybe not to this level. Maybe I'll pick like 4 or 5 areas and just say like, hey, these are some things that we're seeing this year. Maybe we can use some iReady data at that point, potentially. I don't want to promise that though, because I don't know where we'll be there. But there's probably a few things we can very easily kind of show and say, hey, these are some things that we're seeing some progress on.
Okay.
And I tried to more broadly update kind of where we're at, where we're going, but we don't have all the data collected, so I can't really
Understood.
share.
Okay. I've looked at this versus kind of some other prior plans, and substantively, I really like what we're focused on, and I think it's
Yep.
really what's going to help move the district. So I commend you for that. I'd like to see sort of better definition of the goal and how we're going to measure it.
Yep.
So as you move forward, to the extent where why are we doing it, and I think it ties directly into Joe's budget comment.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to defend something when you're
Yep.
saying this is what we want to be, this is what we want to do, this is why we need to get there, and this is how we're going to assess it.
Yeah.
And it may be not the right thing in the end, right? And you may come back and say, no, we didn't meet that, and this is why, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I think as we move the budget forward, and certainly as we move this plan forward, I'd like to just see the format maybe a little bit different.
And I think one of the things we're learning through this process is that I think we're collecting more data in better ways than we ever have. And I think one of our goals / challenges this year is how to figure out, because like we've had the formatting discussion too, and it's tricky sometimes to capture different types of information in a way that provides clarity.
Yep.
And that's one of the things we're kind of struggling with, and I think that might be some of the things we kind of learn and implement either in year 2 or year 3 or in the next plan, because I think we're learning a lot just going through this process in a very different way than we have previously.
Okay.
Like we're just collecting more survey data than we ever have before. We're collecting more, like I think the interim assessments are going to provide us with more student data than we've ever had before. I think the MCIA performance assessments, again, they're still a work in progress, but I think we're going to have a lot more actionable and shareable data. But I hesitate because all this is so new to say, and I think the clarity is something we definitely need.
Yeah.
But for some of these areas, I hesitate to say, hey, I want to roll this data out because we may decide, hey, this is going to be internal data we just use formatively,
Sure.
because it's not going to and I don't want to say tell the story, but it's not going to necessarily make a case or present a picture in a way that I think would be effective. So I think it's going to be an iterative process, and I think it's something we're going to get better at over time, but it's a point well taken.
And I understand that, and I certainly appreciate some areas are very complex to do that. But for example, where the target is ST Math and the measure is implement ST Math, I think we could be a little more explicit about why
Yeah.
ST Math is so important and what we hope it to drive in terms of math achievement, as one example.
Yeah, and I think we're going to get a better sense of like if there's any connection or correlation locally with that after a year or two of implementation. I think when we initially set the plan up, we looked at some of the national data that they're collecting, but I don't know at this point if we can kind of make the same connection to like the locals, and we're going to see.
Okay.
But I think in a year or two we'll be able to set some more realistic targets with it.
But when we budget for it to implement it, we have a goal, right? We think it's going to do something.
Yeah.
So I'd like us to
Yeah, and
define that.
I think the goal is really to close those gaps by 50%.
Okay.
But again, I to see if it's causal or not from a statistical perspective, I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I'm ready at the. And it's a great example because like the 60 minutes is very.
Sure.
Like that's very concrete.
Yep,
And we
absolutely.
were able to show that tonight pretty
Yep.
clearly.
But in here, it's ST
Yeah.
Math and implement ST Math.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'd love to see X% are doing the 60 minutes, like
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's something we can very easily provide. I
Great.
think making the causal connection to the like any improvements, I think is premature.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Well, so just based on that, I was wondering in your discussions, have you thought about making the plan longer, length of plan?
So what we really tried to do when we did this plan initially was make it shorter.
Okay.
And we still ended up having, I don't know, like 54 indicators or 45 or whatever.
Oh,
it
no,
was.
I meant, sorry, length of, I'm sorry, I'm tired.
Length of
Length
time.
of time, yeah, from like a 3-year to say a 5-year plan?
So we, and again, this is something that I felt strongly on based on the plans that were in place before, is I felt like the 5 years were almost too long.
Okay.
And we're actually doing a 3-year kind of rolling plan that we're probably gonna, this summer, start looking at the next 3 years. Because we know some things, like we know the math achievement and growth is probably gonna continue on to the next, I can guarantee that with 100% certainty, and that's something we're gonna be focusing on over the next 5 years. But I almost think 5 years is almost too long to look at. I think we've got other plans, like Greg's curriculum plan is looking at like a 3 to 5 year implementation process. It's like a subset that kind of grew out of this strategic plan
Okay.
from like a spending perspective. It's something to think about.
Okay.
And I'm tired too, so I'm kind of babbling right now.
Yeah, no, I just curious if you had considered it.
More so
maybe
than usual.
something, you know, we want
Yeah,
to
no,
think about.
we always look at the plan. We go
Yeah.
back and forth. And I think there's a case to be made on either side.
Okay.
You know, I think we went with 3 year because we really wanted to be focused and we wanted to kind of almost see it through, because I felt like we lost a lot in previous 5 year plans, where stuff would get moved to the wayside as the 5th year was coming on. There was kind of a scramble for some areas, where this feels a lot more like a living, breathing document to me. And I think it's really driving everything, because it's driving everything from school improvement plans to budget proposals, and it's flexible, and generally flexible in public schools are not two things that are said in the same sentence very frequently. So, but there is an argument to be made for 5 years, because you can kind of set longer term goals.
Right. That's
So
it.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but
Okay.
I'm just saying there's like a thought process that went into this.
Question.
Go ahead, Chris, I'm sorry.
I guess, and I don't wanna go too far down into details, but do we overall do we track like the Milford Public School students that, that are going on to college, and what their graduation rates are
So-
in comparison?
Yeah, so we're finally getting that data for the,
Yeah.
I think in the last 2 or 3 years, we really started to collect that data.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if it was a long-range planning meeting or the school committee, but I think Josh was sharing some of the information.
Right, I know it was
And
more
it's-
like collectively, like,
Yeah.
kind of more nationwide, I'm not sure.
And we've got
if
some
you
we've got
broke it
local data
down,
too.
did local,
And our
okay.
local
Yeah.
data is actually matching,
Yeah.
or within a few percentages to
Yeah.
the national data,
Yeah.
is where we're really seeing, and this is why we're trying to provide more supports for our students
Right.
who are economically disadvantaged, because those students are just not completing college. It's,
Right.
even if they're getting enrolled, there's what's called like a summer slide, where some kids don't actually even enroll their freshman year.
Mhm.
And then there's also, a variety of reasons why students don't complete. And sometimes it's related to factors outside of school, because it just, the family of the student doesn't
Right,
have
yeah.
means to continue. We're really, we're working with the Framingham State Planning Center a lot, Colleen Coffey and her team. And, they're doing a lot of work with some of our families. We've got a guidance counselor that comes in, I think, one afternoon a week, they're really looking at the financial side of it, especially
But
for.
we're tracking that population, we're able, and we'll
We've
be
got
able
that data
to-
for the first time.
Right, and so we can start to
Yep.
react towards that,
Yep.
and in comparison to, are we tracking, the students that are going into the workforce, and I guess, can we track them, and is there
Rate-
lessons learned from them, that, are we preparing them for, life beyond 12th grade when they're not doing that College Avenue, and I guess.
Yeah, so right now, part of what we're seeing too is with our shifting populations is we're seeing a lot of kids who are maybe saying they're gonna go to a community college or a particular college, and they're going maybe right into the workforce, or going to school part-time and working full-time. And what we're trying to do is, I don't think we're gonna have workforce data right now, I don't
Right.
think we have access to that, but what we're trying to do from a programmatic perspective, and that's why things like hotel and hospitality management,
Right.
the building trades courses, some of the partnerships we're trying to develop with the community colleges for certificate programs that lead to kind of lucrative careers with.
Yeah, because you're segueing, so should that, 25% of our school graduate population isn't going on to a college, so I guess, do we need to have this into the strategic education plan, that we are looking at that grouping
And it's
of
actually
students?
in there.
It is?
Yeah.
Did I miss it or not?
I didn't talk about it tonight, just 'cause
Okay.
cause I couldn't talk about everything.
All right, so, I guess, can you just quickly then give me,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
so
in
some of the-
30
yeah.
seconds, I just wanna know that, listen, it's 25% of our student population
Yeah.
in the high school, that we're not just ignoring them.
Yeah,
We've
so-
got a plan, a 1 to 3 year plan of how we're going to grow programs for them.
So what we're really looking at right now is implementable pathways that lead a student to, a student who's not planning on going to college into kind of either a career pathway or a certificate program through a community college. So a few of the areas we're kind of exploring right now, some of our challenges is from a facilities perspective. Because right now we don't have enough science lab space. We don't have enough, like if we were to put an advanced manufacturing program in, we just don't have the space to kind of do like, manufacturing floor kind of simulation. So that's where the partnerships with like Mass Bay would come into play, because what we could do is maybe provide a number of like either prerequisite or help me out with this, Jim. What's that manufacturing program? It's got like an acronym. I'm just blanking out right now.
Was it Masswick or
Something like that.
yeah.
But there's some programs we're looking to put in place that kind of that prepare kids so they only have to take maybe a more limited amount of courses to kind of get that license.
Great.
And we're also looking at some things in the medical fields that don't necessarily require either a 2 or 4 year degree, but lead to high paying jobs and some technician type jobs, whether it's and again, without it in front of me, I'm gonna have
No,
a
that's
hard
fine.
time.
Again, I
But
just want to make
I
sure
think it
that,
gives you a sense that
again,
that's
that we're considering that, that growth
100%.
within our school system.
because right now our programming, the vast majority of our programming is designed for kind of the college bound student.
Yeah.
And it kind of came out of, and it's funny how things kind of ebb and flow, because we had, and again, I don't know when people graduated, there's a number of Milford High graduates sitting around this table right now, but we had a lot of shops at Milford High School years ago. That went away, I think, with No Child Left Behind, maybe even a little before that, because the writing was on the wall. There was shifting, programming was shifting in that direction. I think comprehensive high schools now generally, and I think we're kind of leading the charge here in Milford, are kind of swinging back to make sure that, students who, although we got them accepted to like a community college or a 4-year school, either aren't completing the programs, aren't attending the programs, and these are ways that we're not having students and families invest a significant amount of money and not get it in return.
Good. And my last one is with clerical error for you. It's no longer MPAC, it's CPAC.
Oh, CPAC
So,
now.
It's CPAC now.
What's the C stand for?
So it's the Special Education Parent Advisory Council. It was your
Okay.
MPAC your MPAC was part of the
Special ed, yeah.
education. I just want to make sure
Yeah.
as you perused over it, but
All
yeah,
right.
it's now.
So you're already evolving.
Special Education Parent Advisory Council.
All right.
All right. So no longer
I will-
MPAC, so you can fix that
I will
slide
make
for
that
me.
adjustment.
There.
Absolutely.
So, and hopefully everybody, we can see everybody at the next meeting.
Yep. Great.
Thank you.
Mhm.
You want to touch on class size too?
So the class size, I don't really have a presentation or discussion, but we're always monitoring class size across the district. And we've had to make some adjustments this year because, like at the high school level, we had an increase of EL students that jumped in that required us to make some adjustments. We also had a significantly higher enrollment in Algebra 1 courses at the 8th grade level that also required a shift. I would say in your packets, that are the PDFs that are put together by school, I would almost recommend that if you want to take a look at them, because there's tons of information. I'm happy to answer any questions maybe at the next meeting, and I can maybe leave a slot there if folks want to answer questions.
Can I ask one maybe general question?
Yeah.
Kevin? Do we have targets set somewhere in terms of levels?
We do.
Is that in a policy or is that?
It's more like a goal, because we can't really, there's a fair amount of predictability at the high school level. We generally have a sense, but there's some years where like a lot of kids are interested in AP biology,
Mhm.
and that'll shift like sometimes class sizes or sometimes the number of sections we offer.
Sure.
Um,
Is that goal document defined somewhere that's accessible?
It's not because it's kind of, it's almost like practices or rules of engagement.
Okay.
Ideally, we don't like classes to go above 25.
I think
They
that
do-
was policy language.
It's in the,
Is it in the,
it's in the contract,
Contract,
teacher's
yeah, there was a-
contract.
Because I know it was a big touch.
it was a
24.
topic of
Contract.
discussion.
Is it
24,
24 is the limit?
I think so.
But it's not the limit.
It's not the limit,
There's language that
Okay.
says like this is
The
kind of-
av-
this is what we're trying to target. And again, I don't have the language.
It's
in
the
front of me.
goal of the Milford school committee to make sure that the classes stay at 24 or under.
Thanks.
Do we
Something
track
like
the
that.
It
trend?
might
think
even
it's that
be in
different.
We do. We
Something
do.
like that.
Yeah, I guess as we go over, you know,
I think
there's a
if you-
lot of data there, but
yeah,
if we could,
I think if you
could
look
present the
at-
trends to us. it'd be a
Yeah, and
lot
I'm happy
easier
if
to break
people want me to
down.
do a brief presentation on the numbers. I was more gonna just kind of give it to you and see if you had questions.
Goal.
Yeah.
But like another example of something we're seeing is our 7th and 8th grade, 7th and 8th grade classes are just larger classes just by sheer number, like
Right.
there's just a bubble
Right.
in the population.
They do.
And so they're tricky because like at the elementary level, we have a couple swing teachers. So we can move like a 1st grade teacher to 2nd grade and then have the person shift back. It's a little more challenging like at the middle school and the high school because it's more course based. And so we're, I think we're gonna make a couple recommendations that are gonna impact, or Josh is making a couple requests at the high school level that I think will help. Like just our science offerings overall, and will also help with class sizes as this bubble hits. But even after the bubble leaves, because you don't want to make major hiring,
Right.
because you don't want it, like there to be a real ebb and flow there. But I think the recommendations we're making for positions are also going to meet long-term needs in terms of where we know we've had more requests than we've had the ability to fill those requests. Okay.
And that's the question that I had, so for at the next meeting or whenever you come back to talk about it, if you can sort of address how you're planning for that bubble to come
Yep.
through the high school.
Yep.
Because as you pointed out, there was a challenge this year with
With the
math,
math.
so
Yeah.
you want to avoid that same issue going into freshman year next year.
Yeah, yeah. And the math is tricky because it's a relatively new, like the way we do math at the middle school has shifted in the last couple of years. And if obviously the perfect storm of the 2 big bubble classes coming through at the same,
Right.
within the same year or 2 of that happening. Josh and I and Cecil have been having a lot of conversations about, class sizes and how it's gonna fit. And when we go through the budget discussion, we'll hit that. I think that's January 5th, Kath, we have the budget meeting.
Yes,
Yeah.
9 AM.
So that'll be part of that discussion too.
And I think the general rule or philosophy, and I could be off base here, but it seems like we tend to put more kids in the honors classes. And oftentimes that may not be the best approach because those kids have just as many needs as lower performing students, in some cases even more. So they could benefit from smaller class sizes as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you, John. All right, next on the agenda is future agenda items. Anybody want to add anything to the next agenda items? Old business?
Maybe just to follow up quickly, Jill, on the committee's goals, so we're just gonna find a meeting date kind of within the next 2 weeks to sit down as a group to follow up on. It's a policy document, so we'll follow up from the policy subcommittee, but also in terms of actually defining goals.
And I-
We're just moving that forward.
I think Melissa sent out an email
Yep,
tonight about that
exactly.
too. Okay. One other thing I wanted to bring up too, with Jen was here earlier today talking about ELL and everything. I know she said a lot of students nowadays need to be like bilingual.
Mhm.
It brings up a point that Laura had brought up not too long ago about the second language, learning that in the earlier grades.
Yep.
Awful. We could bump that up, or if we can have time, we can get that reviewed and see how we can plan something like that. That'd be awesome.
Okay.
What else? All right, and with that, we do have executive session tonight, so we will not be returning, so can I get a roll call?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
And Laura had left, and with that, can I get a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting? Motion by Jim, seconded by Megan, all in favor? Thank you.